All right, welcome everybody again to this evening's session of the American Dreams State Review. We are going to be covering section of Chapter 6 in the Guide to Passing the Colorado State Exam. It is an ebook on our website. You should be downloading that, making notes or presenting, having on your someplace where you can make notes on it, just like your book. If you do it electronically, fine, that's cool. But it's we're going to be covering contracts. Let me just share with you real quick. This here, when you look at, this is the PSI bulletin, and it's going to show you for the state exam. I'm looking under the state exam. Okay, state portion content outline. And here's where you will see 23 items will be from Colorado forms and contracts. Now on the exam for the state, if you recall, you have 74 questions. Of that, 23 are going to be on contracts. You think the state is really wanting you to know your contracts. You get that? It's very important for you to know your contracts. This is going to be the way you're going to be doing business. So remember, Conway Bowe makes you an attorney when not like an attorney. I mean, you are an attorney with limited scope. That was the decision from Conway Bowe. So you better know your contracts, attorneys. This is the time. That's why 23 questions. This is an important class. All right, I set the stage. Now let's get into these contracts. Oh, before we do, what I want to do also is show you where you can find all your contracts online. You go to the Colorado Department, DORA. We call this DORA. If you ever hear DORA being said, that's what they're referring to, Department of Regulatory Agencies for Colorado that license all kinds of things. In there is the Division of Real Estate. And that's where you want to find this page here. You can Google it, comes right up. That's where you can file a complaint. We talked about that in our last session. Now here's broker contract forms. You can click here and see these are the commission approved forms. You must use these forms. So list all the different contracts and forms that you are supposed to be using in your business. So exclusive right to sell, if you're going to be representing a tenant, right to lease, right to buy, those are your employment contracts. Here's your sales contracts. We're going to be covering the exclusive right to sell this evening. Now, once you learn one of these, you then need to refer to the other ones. This is your task, is to refer to the other ones in here and just look at the differences, because there's a whole lot of overlap. You're going to see that demonstrated this evening.
A lot of overlap.
Make sure you leave. Okay. Sales contracts. We're going to be covering the contract to buy and sell residential. But there are other types of contracts that, again, you need to go and look at after we review the one this evening to be certain that you can understand. If you have any questions on that, on those, then you email us. But you'll see a lot of overlapping going on. Just refers to different things in the business. This is your addendums. We're going to be covering some of these in here, not all of them. So ones we cover, great. You need to go back in and look at, in other words, take a look at all the forms and contracts that are available to you. Don't go into this test blindsided and not looking at these. Here's your disclosures. We'll be covering square footage and seller's property disclosure, residential and lead-based paint disclosure. We've already done definitions of a working relationship. Okay, so we've done a couple of these. Here's your certain notices to terminate here, for instance, notice to terminate. Some authorization. Here's your inspection resolution. We'll be covering that. Counter proposals. We talked about that in the last session, or in the national too as well. Here's your amendments. This is where you're amending the contract. Difference between an addendum, you're adding something. Here's your amending the contract. Closing forms, closing statement, closing instructions. This is, you're going to be tested some test questions on closing instructions. We'll cover them this evening. Make sure you read these. They're pretty straightforward. Your deeds of trust. Remember, in Colorado, it's interesting, we had a discussion this evening, earlier today, a meeting with the faculty. And, in Colorado, as brokers, we are responsible for the closing. So whenever you see questions on the exam or in your tests, and it refers to a credit going to the broker, you're thinking, why in the world would I get a credit in a closing? Because you are responsible for the closings. This is the way the commission is viewing this. In reality, we engage then our title companies to take care of it for us. So from the outside world, looking in, it appears that all the broker is doing is showing up at closing. Title companies doing all those magical things with the numbers, and then we just show up and be happy because we get paid. No, that's from the outside looking in. Now you're learning that as a broker in Colorado, we are responsible for that closing. We're engaging our title company to do it. Therefore, since the commission is saying we're responsible, we need to know how it is done and manually be able to do it. When I first took the exam, I got news for you. You're lucking out on the exams today. When I first took this Colorado broker exam 18 years ago, I actually had to do a closing statement from beginning to end. And I'll fail forward for you. I didn't pass that part of it. It was like, wow, here we go. Wasn't used to doing that. So I retook it. And the next closing one I had was even more complex. It had to do with the fourplex and prorating the rents. Some rents were coming in, other ones were still out there, hadn't been paid yet. And they had to prorate all that and figure. It was I did it like 4 times before I could come up with the answer twice the same way, and that's the answer I chose. And obviously I got my license. So now, the important part here is I'm stressing to you guys, we are responsible for the closings in Colorado. Other states are different. For Colorado, because I was licensed in Nevada, it wasn't like that. But Colorado, we're responsible for, therefore, that's why we got to know about the closings. That's why we got to know our contracts. Our responsibilities here are a bit higher, I believe, than other states. That's why the test is harder. That's why you got more hours you have to go ahead and put in. All right, moving on. Here's your deeds. We've talked about these deeds here. Yes, we have. Promissory notes. Now, promissory notes we'll be bringing up here too as well. Bills of sale for personal property. Here's some optional forms. Okay, so if you are trying to do some business and you don't see one of the forms in this list, that's when you need to engage an attorney to draw it up for you. That's the Conway-Bogue rule that we have to follow. Okay, all right. Now let's go into fun stuff, contracts. All right. All right, first one we'll be taking a look at is the listing contract. There's 3 types of listing contracts you could be testing on. It's going to be the exclusive right to buy, exclusive right to sell contracts, the exclusive agency contracts, or an open listing contract. You see them all being compared for us right here in your ebook. And the best way to look at it, we got to look at how the commission is going to be protected now, how the listing agent is protected regarding the commission. So with the exclusive right to sell or buy, you have the maximum protection to your commission, because when you're employed with this agreement by either the buyer or the seller, when there's a transaction involving that principal, you are going to get paid a commission. You're guaranteed. So if you're the selling listing agent and another agent brings a buyer in, you will get paid. If the seller after listing the house that evening, goes to work the next day and says, hey, I just listed my house. I'm going to be selling and getting another house. I'm so excited. We're building this house, blah, 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 blah. And one of his coworkers says, really, wow, man, last dinner party we had over your place, I really enjoyed in your house. I mean, we just loved it. And boy, if I'd have known you were selling it, I'd have made an offer to it before you got it listed. And so guess what? We can talk to that buyer. The seller can refer that buyer to us, and we would still get paid with an exclusive right to sell. Now compare that to the exclusive agency. That same type of thing going on with exclusive agency. Same scenario, right? He goes to work, says, hey, just listed my house. And, I'm so excited. And one of his coworkers says, yeah, geez, last dinner party, I loved your house. I would love to go ahead. I wish you'd have known to make an offer on your property. Seller can say, really? You like to make an offer? You like my house that much? Yeah, I really did. Well, great. You can make an offer on the property. I'll let you. So they do, and they make an offer and they sells it to that coworker. You do not get a commission with an exclusive agency listing. So with the exclusive agency, listen up, the seller reserves the right to sell without owing a commission. That's how exclusive agency works. Open listing is kind of like it is what for sale by owners do when they offer to pay a buyer's agent a commission if they bring an acceptable offer to them. They will pay a commission to that buyer's agent and only that buyer's agent, nobody else. So only the buyer is being represented in that transaction. So with an open listing, just remember whoever brings an offer to the seller that is acceptable to the seller, that's when a commission will be paid. There typically isn't even really an agreement in writing with an open listing. It's something the seller just offers agents a commission if you bring me an offer that I'll accept. Whereas exclusive agents and exclusive right, you'll find the exclusive right to buy and sell. That's the contract that you'll find the form of. Okay. All right. Any questions on those three type of listing contracts that we're discussing? No? Okay. Boy, it's quiet tonight. We had a lively crowd on, what was it, Saturday? Yeah, Saturday. All right, here's something we've seen on the exam. If the seller wants you to do something not allowed under license law, like discriminate against potential buyer, you're encouraged to refuse to take the listing. So yeah, you know what? Guess what, folks? You have a business that you're going to own, and you get to choose who you're going to do business with, as long as it isn't discriminatory. Then you can choose. And there's nothing discriminatory about working with mean people, working with just people that are really difficult. Unless you enjoy that, maybe birds of a feather. I'm not saying that you are, but sometimes if you do, for me, I like to do business with people that that I can communicate with, that I can relate, that they can relate to me, that we can, you just kind of know, right? And if your spidey sense goes up, right, and you're just feeling uncomfortable about it, you get to choose. You don't have to take every business. There's some kind of misnomer out there. Well, you have to take my listing because that's what the law says. No, I don't. I don't like you, so I'm not taking the listing. It's all it comes down to. All right. So you get to choose who to take. And definitely, if they're saying to do something discriminatory, that's when you just, I wouldn't touch you with a 10-foot pole. All right. All exclusive right to sell listing contracts are express agreements. They're in writing. This term express agreement, when you see that, it's either going to be verbal at something in words. Express agreements are in words. In this case, they must be in writing. That's why it's a parentheses in writing, because simply express can go either way. They got to be in writing. They're not implied, not by my actions. All right, here we go. Our first contract, the exclusive right to sell listing contract. So before we get in, I want to point a few things out here too, structure-wise. You take a look at this contract. I want you to notice numbers going down the left column over here. See all these numbers going down the left column? These are line, excuse me, line numbers. So that if I wanted to, maybe if I'm drawing up an addendum or amendment, and I'm referring to a section in a particular contract, all the contracts have these line numbers. I can refer to the line number to get really specific about where I'm going to make an amendment to for whatever reason. You know, reference line number 13, and that happens to be the agreement, for instance, here. So that's the purpose of these numbers over here. It's a reference point. Okay. Also, at the very top, I want you to notice there's a box, and you'll see this box at the top of every single one of our contracts. In this box, it lets you know that this has been approved by the Colorado Real Estate Commission. It gives the form number. In this case, it's LC 50-6-19. That's the contract form number. This is the mandatory. The reason why it's mandatory, because if you're going to do this contract in writing, it's got to be in writing. This is the contract you are mandatorily have to use. Remember, Conway Bogue. Okay. And this 1-20 is the last time this was revised, January of 2020. You'll see this box in every top of every form with this information. You must always, always use the most recent form. If there's an old form that you have on your drive or something, and you go online will always have the most recent forms. You go online and you find out, oh, geez, I've got the mandatory form for 2019. You know, they did that 2 years in a row. They made a change. So if you got the 2019 one you're using, it's not the one they want you to use. It's not going to work. Okay. Got to use the most current form. Okay, line 3, if anything, line 3 and 4, if anything that you see in our forms that are in capitalized or and in bold, it is very important. So make sure that you are advising your clients about those sections. You should be able to, as an attorney, review this entire contract with your client. So I always give people 2 ways that I can review a contract with. I present my contracts. I say, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, here's our exclusive right to sell or exclusive right to buy, whichever one that it refers to. And this is where you're going to hire me as your agent. So in doing so, I have 2 ways that I can review this contract with you. 1, I can go line by line and explain anything that you see, and I can go over this entire contract with you, line by line. 2, I can point out the areas, since this is a state approved contract. I cannot make any changes to this contract. It's a standard form. There are only areas that I can make changes to. I will go over those areas with you and just briefly explain the other paragraphs that are in here in the sections. Which would you choose for me to do? You have to have the ability, folks, to go line by line. And for your exam, you should be doing that. Okay, so I'm going to help you with this. All right, first thing is it's a binding contract, has important legal consequences. Parties should consult legal and tax or other counsel before signing. So this is your disclosure. Go seek an attorney, go seek a tax accountant, because the impact of this may affect your finances, and it's a legal document. So you may need some legal advice. Okay. Number 5, line 5, is compensation charged by the firms is not set by law. These are established by each real estate brokerage firm. So this now lets them know that you're adhering to the Sherman antitrust laws. You don't have to say this is my Sherman antitrust disclosure. No, you have to say that. You know that because this is going to be part of your exam. This is where this shows up. That you're not, that all commissions are negotiable. There are no set commissions. Okay. And then now, line 6 and 7, different brokerage relationships are available, which include buyer agency, seller agency, or transaction brokerage. Those are the only types of relationships, agency relationships, that we can have. Okay. And then we have transaction brokerage. All right. Line 9 is the heading of the contract is the exclusive right to sell listing contract. And then line 10, now we have the first time we see something, we have a choice. We can choose to create this as a seller agency, where I will be the agent of the seller, or I can choose to be the transaction broker, where now I cannot advocate for the seller. And we discussed the difference between the coach and the referee. Seller agency and the coach, transaction broker and the referee. So we choose, and that'll set the tone of how this contract will be applied in other areas. Next is the date, line 12. So the date is the date that we fill out that we are filling this contract out. Like I'm filling it out much as I can, leaving areas that we're going to discuss with the seller, and that's the date that I put on. It doesn't have to match the date the seller is signing necessarily. Many times it does, but it doesn't have to. Sometimes the seller may take it and want to think about it, or want to take it and have it reviewed by an attorney, or just doesn't give you an answer, and it may take a week for them to go back and sign. So it doesn't have to match up. There's no laws or rules or saying it's got to be signed so many days after. It's just the date here is the date you're filling it out. Okay. All right. Then we have the agreement, paragraph 1, first paragraph. So what's the agreement? It says seller and brokerage firm enter into this exclusive, irrevocable contract, seller listing contract, and agrees to its provisions. Stop right there. Seller and brokerage firm enter into it. Seller and brokerage firm, not seller and agent. Seller and brokerage firm enter into this. You as the agent are going to facilitate the agreement, but the agreement is with the firm. Remember, they own this. So if you go to a different brokerage, they can keep this. They have every right to, because it's their agreement. It's their right here. Seller and brokerage firm enter. It's irrevocable contract. Irrevocable means what? Means you can't just decide, oh geez, we made this agreement, and you know what, I changed my mind. I don't really want you to do this anymore for me. Oh, really? Well, I put a lot of expense in marketing and efforts and everything else, and you know, I've been reporting and all the activity to you, and you know, showing all the things. I haven't, you know, kept you abreast of everything going on. Now you just change your mind. You want to use somebody else. I don't have to, as the listing agent representing the firm, let that seller with that kind of reason out of this contract, because it's an irrevocable contract. Now I'm going to show you areas where the seller can terminate, and we can terminate the contract. But as it stands, it's an irrevocable contract. There's only certain ways to terminate. So we also now, this next one here, I've reminded more than one client about this next part of this sentence, and agree to its provisions. So already you are agreeing to everything in this body of this agreement. When you sign it, when everybody signs, we are all agreeing to the things that are in here. So if you forget along the way, 6 months from now, and something comes up, like what is the reason you're going to be wanting to retain that earnest deposit from that buyer? They did everything correctly and terminated according to the contract. Yeah, but I've taken my house off the market for so much and for so long, and I'm going to keep their money. It just isn't right. No, they did everything correctly. It just so happens that they didn't like the inspection and the things that came back, and now it's, you know, whatever the reasons are, right? If the seller's going to say, well, I know I should keep that money, sometimes sellers get caught up in the things, they get kind of, you know, greedy, I think, because they're thinking they're stressed about selling their house. I get it. That's why we're there to remind them calmly, of course, you've agreed to this provisions and they've terminated correctly. First sentence, you agree to provisions. Okay. Broker on behalf of brokerage firm. That's you. Broker on behalf of the firm. Agree to provide the services, brokerage services, to the seller. The seller agrees to pay the firm as set forth in the listing contract. That's the agreement. Okay? All right. Promise I'm not going to belabor everything like that. Just want to, that's the most important part of this contract. All right. Next, two more choices. We're either going to choose to be a multiple person firm if we belong to one of those, or a one person firm. So in a multiple person firm, that means that I've got more than one broker in one office. I work for, I work for Keller Williams. In our office, we've got up north, one of our offices, like over 200 agents in there. Yeah, I got a multiple person firm. What does that do? Well, what that does in this sentence, in this paragraph here, it says if more than one individual is designated for seller, you've got your property you're selling, could be somebody in our office that represents the buyer, designated the buyer, agent, and you've got an agent designated to you, seller, in our same office. Okay. So the relationships only exist though with the broker, doesn't extend to the employing broker. So we're not going to commingle, we're not going to share information, confidential information. So it's letting the seller know and disclosing to them that we're going to be doing some transactions in-house, meaning the buyer and the seller within the same brokerage, the same office. And if that happens, we're disclosing to you that you're going to be okay with this because we're not going to share any information, and we're allowed to per state law. By checking this box, I'm disclosing that. Now, if I'm an independent contractor, I'm just an independent broker rather, and I'm not affiliated with a firm, then I check one person firm. So that takes out all that designated broker stuff. Okay. All right. Next is paragraph 3. We have to define who is involved in this. Who we define? The seller. Everybody of record on that property must be on here. All owners, co-owners, corporations, whatever entities that are of record must be on here. The firm's name goes on here. Your name goes on here. And here's where the legal description goes. Now, the legal description is lengthy. Right now, you see a small box. All of our contracts are electronic, so you can attach something in here. But sometimes you get, if you had a meets and bounds survey attached to it, there are some areas in Colorado where I've seen, that. So you would see, all you need to do is say see attachment or see exhibit A or something like that, and then you would draw that up and label that and make it part of the include as part of this agreement. So that's where the legal description goes, and also known as, that's where the address goes. Okay. All right. That's what all this verbiage down here says. Now we get into this area. So paragraph 3.5, affordable housing. Affordable housing. Some areas in Colorado are qualified or in affordable housing areas. Therefore, they qualify for special finance in those areas. So if this property is in one of those areas, we check this box. If it is not, then we don't check it. So here where you're learning, there's boxes we're going to check, and some boxes we can leave unchecked, and that's okay if it doesn't apply. All right. So, but here's the affordable housing box. Now, I'm going to be covering the areas that you're making sure you're seeing the important things. It's, again, like always, you need to read everything. Okay. Right. 3.6 is for sale or lease. So if we're selling it, it's a voluntary transfer, voluntary alienation that we learned in our first chapters in the national section. Voluntary, the conveying interest in the property, including a contract or a lease. So if you are selling a property with a lease, that goes with it. Buyer needs to take on whatever provisions of that lease. So obviously in that case, the buyer would not be occupying the property because the lease would need to be fulfilled first. Okay. So if we're doing a lease, then we would check box 3.62. If we're not, then we don't check it. 3.7 is a listing period. Remember, we have to have a beginning date and an end date for the contract to be valid. So here's with the listing period. How long do we put the period for? Whatever you agree with your seller. Maybe your brokerage has a minimum length of time for a listing. Maybe, I'm not aware of that, but could be. Whatever that you know, usually these are the areas that you discuss with your seller and you fill out. So sometimes, a lot of times I get asked, do we fill these out ahead of time and bring it to them? Or do we fill it out in front of them when we're doing it? Kind of both a little bit, right? So certain areas like the legal description, I don't need to sit there and fill that in front of them. I should, professional would have all that part filled out. So, but areas like this, we're going to leave and we're going to fill out as we discuss it with them. Well, usually I do to do this property and do it justice, to market to get the best price for you according to the way that, what you need. Then this is the term that I think we should be using this for. Whatever it is, beginning date, end date. 3.8, just define some terms. The terms NA are deleted, means not applicable, and MEC means mutual execution of this contract. MEC. Okay, if you got this in print, you might want to highlight that, because they could be referring MEC in a scenario, and you're going, MEC, what does MEC stand for? What is MEC? Oh my God, I forgot what was MEC. Now you know what it is, mutual execution of this contract. Okay. Here's something. The day after your listing expired was listed by another licensee and offered in the MLS. Several days later, a third licensee calls you and asks for the key to show the home. You should inform the broker that you are no longer the listing broker. So this type of question we've seen on the exam. And once your listing expires, somebody calls you, then you no longer represent that, especially if somebody else. If you had a holdover, this kind of refers, I think, to a holdover question. I want to show you what a holdover is here in this contract. All right, 3.9 defines what a day is. That goes up until 11:59 p.m. because at 12, guess what? It's a brand new day. And we're using mountain time. Remember, this is Colorado property. And we're going to, if a day, a deadline or something falls on a holiday, falls on a Saturday, Sunday, we choose now, are we going to extend it to the next day, or that is not a holiday or Saturday, Sunday, or are we just going to go hold fast with the days? This could be really critical with certain deadlines that come up. So be careful and discuss the pros and cons here. Okay. If your seller is really pressed for time and things need to happen without being, dilly-dallying along, maybe for whatever reasons, maybe you're holding fast to everything. So again, you discuss it with your seller. All right. Paragraph 4 is a brokerage relationship. So here's where, if we started out as a transaction broker, then only the areas for transaction brokers going to be here. If we start out as a seller's agent, the very top, that first choice, then everything's going to apply in here. Okay. So what are we talking about? So first of all, it goes back into talking about in-company transactions, different brokers. Again, we're a multiple person firm. We have designated brokerage, so we're not going to be sharing information. And we could have in-company transaction, different brokers, and we're paying compensation to all those people. Okay, seller's okay in getting acknowledging this. It could be an intent company transaction, one broker, if the seller and buyer are both working with the same broker. Now, when that happens, so this is the scenario. We're at my open house. I represent the seller. Somebody comes in, they like the house, they want to make an offer. They didn't come in with an agent. They don't have one. And they're okay with me writing the offer. Now it comes down to this. Will I be functioning as a seller's agent and they're going to be then treated as a customer, or will I be functioning as a transaction broker? And here's where this will be filled out so as to prepare for that event. Okay, so if I fill this out, here's accordingly, it says, the following, if the seller agency box is let's say I'm trying to be a seller's agent, so I check that box. Then the following, I'm going to be a seller agent unless brokerage relationship with both. So I'll represent the seller as an agent. I must treat the buyer as a customer. Customer, I have no brokerage relationship, but the broker delivers a seller written change of status, that I'm changing my status, and now I'm going to be a transaction broker. Seller and buyer as a transaction broker, right? Then only 4312 is going to apply. So if I check this box, 4312, that's stating, this is really tricky here, that if this box is checked, broker represents the seller as a seller's agent, I must treat the buyer as a customer. So in that listing consultation, I'm discussing this with the seller and I'm telling them, this is how it's going to work. If I'm in an open house, someone comes in, just like I'm explaining to you folks, this is how I explain it to my clients. Someone comes in, makes an offer. You want me to write the offer for you and for them and present it to you? And they'll usually say, yeah, great. How do you want me to be representing? Do you want me to represent you as the agent when I do that? Or would it be okay if I'm a transaction broker and I'm not going to represent them nor you? I'm just going to be the referee and make sure that this contract happens for you. Which would you prefer? So I've had people tell me, Joe, just make sure you get it sold. Whatever you got to do to get it sold, doesn't matter to me. Okay, and I explained to them the difference between, I can't advocate. I can't be your coach. I can only be your referee. I explained that to them the same way. Use the same reference points. It's easy for people to get it. So I've had people tell me when I explain this to them, wait a minute, you mean to tell me that you're not going to be my agent when you bring me an offer? No. You're going to be my agent. If I'm hiring you, not paying all this money, you're going to be my agent throughout this whole thing. And I'm like, okay, yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Because I am getting paid well, right? Okay, fine. So then I check this box then, 4312. That means we've had this discussion in the event I have this mysterious open house that could happen, or I meet somebody that wants to make an offer. No matter what, they want to make an offer and I don't have an agent, I can help them with the offer still, but I must treat them only as a customer because this seller has requested by me checking this box 4312 that I must be only the seller's agent only. I can no longer change my status and be a transaction broker. But if I leave that unchecked, because the seller doesn't mind if I change the status, then I can do that. When that scenario happens, I can change my status. Now I have to be a transaction broker, and I now become the referee. Either way, the end result is I'll still earn both sides of the commission. But the way I act in that transaction is drastically different. Hopefully you're getting this point. If I act as an agent ever, either for the seller or the buyer, I am really, truly that coach. And I act that way. But if I'm the transaction broker, then I truly am that referee. And I must, per the commission laws, act that way. Okay? So be careful of that. All right. So 432 just explains what a transaction broker does, just like I just did here for you. All right, brokerage duties, paragraph 5. We call these the uniform duties, and they spell out now what you must do, whether or not you were establishing yourself as a transaction broker or a buyer's agent, you both those folks in those groups must do these uniform duties. Okay, so when you're getting hired, you're going to be doing these uniform duties. What are they? Number one, 511, perform the terms of any written and or oral agreement with the seller. Okay, presenting all offers to and from seller in a timely manner, regardless of whether the property is subject to a contract for sale. So let me tell you the importance of this. It's a week before closing, and everybody's happy. It's the closing days. We've gone through it was rough getting through those inspections, getting the property fixed up, the appraisal, whatever the challenges you got to go through. Here you are a week before closing. Everything's been settled. You're just kind of waiting for the time to go by to get your scheduled closing date. An offer comes into you from another agent. Are you supposed to present that to the seller? Yes, that's what 512 exactly means. Offer comes to you at any point in time, a day before closing. You must present that to the seller. Okay? Any offers come in, 512 says you got to present. 513, disclosing to seller adverse material facts actually known by broker. Remember, material facts, however I may become aware of them, I must disclose. Okay, any adverse material facts that I actually know for sure. Advising seller regarding the transaction, advising seller to obtain expert advice into material facts about which the broker knows, but the specifics which are beyond the expertise. Now, remember I told you, all these duties are for transaction brokers and also agents. So advising the seller isn't exclusive to just agents. Transaction brokers can advise the seller regarding the transaction and advise them to obtain expert advice. I'm not saying you can't give advice as a transaction broker. You just can't advocate. Understand the difference in the two words. To give advice and to advocate are two strikingly different things. I'm the coach as the agent. I'm the referee as a transaction broker. Okay. So accounting 515, accounting in a timely manner for all money and property receipt. That's all interest deposits. Where's it going? I got to be accountable to that. Keep the seller fully informed regarding the transaction. This is an area that I'm going to show you when it comes time to terminate a favorite area sellers like to go to try to terminate. Well, you didn't keep me informed. Therefore, I'm terminating according to paragraph 515. Oh, really? Yeah, I called you, you didn't get back, and you took you a day to get back. Oh, it wasn't even 24 hours. You called me last night, and I got back with you by 11. You know, I mean, whatever. They'll stretch it, but that's a favorite place if they read the contract. Keep seller fully informed regarding the transaction. Well, they didn't let me know what's going on. Well, yeah, you better. Now, 5.2, broker must not disclose these things without the informed consent of the seller. What are they? That they're willing to accept less than what the asking price is, what the motivating factors are to sell, that they'll agree to different financing terms, or any other material information unless it's required by law to disclose, or failure would be fraud or dishonest dealings to disclose. So be careful of this. And, you know, one of the things that I do when I have a buyer, if I'm getting ready to make an offer, we call the seller up, the seller's agent rather, not the seller, Joe, the seller's agent, and you say, hey, I'm getting ready to write an offer on Main Street. Somebody must lived in 12. Is she on here tonight? 12? I don't think so. She actually lived on 123 Main Street. I always bring it up. Anyways, and I would say, I'm getting ready to write an offer on that. Want to just ask you a couple of quick questions. Number one, do you have any other offers on that property currently right now? And whatever that answer is, you know, okay. And then number two is the seller readily available to respond to this? How much time do I need to give you guys to respond? I mean, my buyer's anxious to hear back. You know, can we get an answer tonight, or would tomorrow morning be okay? What's a good time? I want to make sure it's good for your seller too. And you can communicate these things, you know, before you write the offer up. And you'd be surprised some of the things I get, the answers I'll get on this and refers to this right here. So, Joe, geez, my seller, gosh, I got one seller in different parts of the country, different parts of the world. I got my sellers are going through divorce, so it's sometimes hard to get in touch with both of them. So you better give me 24, better give me 36 hours, better give me 48 hours. They'll like bleed out all this stuff that the seller's going. That's why they need all this extra time. And I'm hoping that that they're allowed to do that, because if not, they're violating the not to disclose the motivating factors. If your seller wants you to say they're going through divorce, then you can say that, but don't you bring that up. It's not up to you to say anything about it. I don't care how frustrated you are with these people. It's not up to you to bring that up, what the motivating factors are. So sometimes people get frustrated and they say things they shouldn't. Just saying. All right, giving you examples to help you remember. Any facts suspicious regarding circumstances that could psychologically impact or stigmatize the property. Remember, in Colorado, 2 things that we cannot disclose by law. We cannot disclose. What are they? Someone's died in the property, no matter how it happened, naturally or unnaturally, violently or not. Number 2, someone had AIDS in that property. Cannot disclose that. That's stigmatizing the property. Seller consents to broker disclosure of seller's confidential information to the supervising broker or designee for proper supervision. 3 heads are better than 2 sometimes. If I need some proper supervision about something sticking in a transaction, I need to talk to my employing broker or my supervising agent, whatever, my mentor, whatever it is, then I got to be able to do that. 5-4 is letting them know that, hey, we have other business other than you. We have other agreements. You're not the only game in town. We've got other sellers that are engaging us to help sell their properties for them. So we're disclosing this to them. We're also not obligated to seek additional offers to purchase the property while it's subject to the contract for sale. Wait a minute, Joe, didn't you say we have to present all offers? Yes, we do. But I didn't say we have to go find them if we're under contract with one already. That's what 5-5 is. Once we're under contract, we're not under obligation to go find any more better offers. Oh God, great, I'm glad you got this offer. Now, if you find anything better along the way, Joe, let me know. Would you? No. No, we're under contract. We're going to get this one done. Okay, get ready to move. Start packing your place, because when I told you, when I get you under contract, I don't press you until we get you under contract. Then I'm going to make you move, because you're moving out. And now it's time to go, because we're going to close this thing for you. Get you on your way to your next chapter in your life. That's what you hired me for. Okay, so I don't have to look at any of them, but if they come in, I do have to present them. All right, I have no duty to conduct an independent inspection of the property for the benefit of the buyer, or independently verify what the seller is saying, or independent inspectors. And I don't have to inspect it, the buyer's financial condition, or verify the completeness of any statement that the buyer makes. So in other words, I got to take people at their word for what they're telling me. If you're lying to me, seller, it's on you. If the buyer's lying to me, it's on them. Okay? All right. Something we see on the exam, licensee must present an offer, disclose all material facts about a party who cannot complete the transaction. Sure. All right, 5-7. Seller's not liable for brokers' acts or omissions that have not been approved, directed, or ratified by the seller. So this is the indemnification. This was a question in one of the chapters, can't remember where, about cold AC, I think. You know, something was part of cold AC, but indemnification. What's indemnification? That's 5-7. 5-8, when asked, broker will or not disclose or protect prospective buyers, cooperating brokers, the existence of offers. So here's an interesting thing. So we have to discuss this with the seller, right? I mean, what's the pros and cons of presenting offers or letting other brokers know the existence of other offers? Now, this is before it's under contract. Right now, we're in a market condition where multiple offers are coming in. So this is a discussion we have all of us have with our sellers. It should be out. Seller, do you want me to let the agents know when multiple offers are coming in so they know other offers are coming in? You know what it will do? It'll start to create an auction effect. Could do this. And all of a sudden you'll see the property, they'll start outbidding each other. You know, we could do that. I know how to do it. We can play that game and get the most money for your, remember, you hired me to get the most money for your property. And that's one way I can do it. Tell them that. But there's the other side of the coin. I've had buyers that I've taken out to look at properties, and they've already gone through this multiple offer thing and not gotten the property because, you know, when there's 5 offers, one person's happy, 4 are not. And after they do that a couple of times, they get kind of jaded. And I've had buyers tell me, if there are multiple offers going on, we're just going to look at something else because I'm not going to get into that again. I've already got my heart set on broken on 2 properties that I really loved, I wanted to get, and I couldn't because somebody else beat me out. And I have no idea. So no, I don't want to do that anymore. So there's that side of the coin, seller. You could be turning off people from making an offer. So you choose, how do you want me to go? And then you check the box. All right, so then we get to paragraph 6. And here, ladies and gentlemen, here's where we get to the widen the path of the road from the transaction broker to the agent. Because if you're a transaction broker, paragraph 6 does not apply. But if you're an agent, this is what makes you the coach right here. Paragraph 6, what is it? Promote the interests of the seller with the utmost good faith, loyalty, and fidelity. There's your fiduciary. There's your cold AC. You should make a note, fiduciary, cold AC, right? Seeking price and terms that are set forth in the seller listing contract. And counseling. There's your coach, the seller. You counsel, you advocate. You can advise as a transaction broker, but you can't counsel. You can't coach. You can't advocate. An agent can, as any material benefits, risks, or transaction of a transaction that are actually known by the broker. That makes you the agent. Okay. All right. Paragraph 7. Compensation to the firm. So this is where you state and establish how the firm's going to get paid. What's the commission going to be? And we begin with the total commission. What's the total commission going to be? Remember, commissions are negotiable. We disclose that very top of this contract. So the compensation on 7.1, we state that it's either going to be a percentage of the gross, or it could be some dollar amount. Maybe it's a straight flat fee dollar amount. It's a limited listing. Could be. You can use this form for a limited listing. Just use it for a limited or full service listing. Whatever you've agreed upon for the total commission goes in 711. We would check box for buyer's agent and transaction broker if we're going to choose to cooperate and share that commission with them. So here we would check the box if we're going to work with the buyer's agent, and then we would put the percentage of the gross sales price. So if we use some numbers in here, and we just use this as an example for purpose of instruction, knowing full well that all commissions are negotiable. If we put a sales commission of 10% for on 711, we could check a box if we're going to choose to split that in half with our other agent that brings us a buyer, whether that be a buyer's agent or a transaction broker. We'll give them, we would put 5% in there for the gross sale, not 50%, 5%. So it isn't the 50% of the commission. Look at what it says in here. It says a percent of the gross sales price. So if I'm charging 10% total of the gross purchase price, and I choose to split that in half with another agent if they bring me a buyer, I would then put 5% for buyer's agent and 5% for transaction broker. Okay? You don't add them all up and they're not making like, oh, I'm paying like 20%. No, that's not what it means. Read the contract. If I'm doing a lease, I would fill out 712. If not, I leave it blank. 713 is for any other compensation, for instance, administrative fees. I usually charge an administrative fee because I usually have some kind of assistant or transaction broker to file the transaction for me. So I help offset that cost with an administrative fee. That's where this would go. All right, 7.2, when is it earned? So the commission is earned upon the occurrence of the following. So the sale of property within the listing period by the broker or any other person. That's your exclusive right to sell. 2.2, broker finding a buyer ready, willing, and able to complete the sale as specified in the seller listing contract. Okay, did you catch what everything that I just said there? That's written there. If I find somebody who is ready, willing, and able to complete the sale or lease as specified, in other words, no negotiation, they're going to pay exactly what you asked for. Okay, it says that I've earned my commission. It's earned upon the occurrence of the following, and that's what it says, folks. This is important for you to know because this could come up in a question. 7.2.3 is if I'm doing a lease, any sale or lease rather, of the property within so many calendar days at the listing period. This is your holdover. 7.2.3 is your holdover paragraph. What's a holdover? Okay, so your contract, you're trying to sell the house, took you 6 months to try to sell it, and it didn't sell. Wasn't a market like we have today. Or maybe it was a difficult property to sell. Whatever reason, it didn't sell. And now it's expired. If you had somebody that had interest in that property and you submitted that name to that person to the seller during the listing period, and that person then, after it expires, comes and contacts you, expresses a desire to make an offer and buy that property. If they do that within the holdover period, then the contract would be still, you would get paid according to the contract, the terms of the contract, even though the contract expired. Here's how that works. Something like this. Let's say, I had a real difficult property I'm trying to sell. And I've got one last weekend before this thing expires. On Monday, it's expiring. So I'm going to do one last open house. And I do this open house. And I got all kinds of things going on to try to attract more people. Try to sell this one last time. And here comes a couple coming in and they see it, and sure enough, wow, they like the purple walls and the polka dots and everything. Why all the reasons why it didn't sell, the green carpet, whatever reasons it didn't sell, they love it. They fall in love with this property. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I finally found a buyer for it. And then they tell me, yeah, but Joe, you know what? We got to go back to Texas and sell our house before we can buy this one. You know, I can't make an offer on it until we get our house to sell. But don't worry, we got a pretty good market there. We should get it sold pretty soon. I'm going, oh, really? You can't make an offer and we could just try to wait? No, they won't make an offer. Okay, fine. When your house sells, call me, let me know. Come Monday, the property, my listing expires. I didn't get it sold. And I had a 30-day holdover period right here. I put 30 calendar days. So now, 2 weeks after this thing expires, I get a call from Texas. It's the people. They sold their house and they want to make an offer. Hooray. I go and look up to see if this property has been relisted. Number one. Number two, if it hasn't been relisted, I contact the seller. Because it's within 30 days of it expiring, I can now, when I did my open house, I always submit the name, everybody sign in, and I submit that, hey, I have submitted that name to the seller. So now they want to make an offer. They make an offer. I'm going to get paid according to the provisions, whatever this contract was agreed upon. That's how the holdover period works. Now, did you notice the actions I took? What's the first step I did when I got the phone call from Texas? I checked to see if it was relisted. the property is relisted, then I don't get to go and bring an offer to them with a holdover because they have now owed a commission to somebody else. Seller cannot owe a commission to two different people, two different brokers on the same property. So now guess what? I become the buyer's agent and I submit an offer to the seller. I just don't get both sides of the transaction. I still get a commission. Hey, half of the pie is better than no pie, right? All right, so makes sense how a holdover period works, hopefully? Yeah? Okay. When is it payable? So it's payable, my commission is payable upon the sale, the closing of the sale. Or if there was no sale, then on the date of closing, the contracted date of closing is contemplated, or where the offer made by the buyer is not accepted by the seller. So if the seller just, in other words, I find a ready, willing, and able buyer. Basically, I got this crazy seller that wants to sell. I got $1 million property he wants to sell. He says, Joe, will you sell my property? I want to sell it for $1 million. I'm thinking, really, $1 million listing? Yay, I want that. But here are the terms. It's got to be cash. You only accept cash. He wants a $100,000 earnest deposit, non-refundable. He wants a 3-month after the sale lease back because it's going to take him that long to get all his stuff out of there. And he's not going to pay a dime to rent his property back. So it's just going to, buyer's just going to have to eat it. So it's going to be a 3-month wait for the buyer to access it. Those are the terms that will sell the property for $1 million. I'm like, wow, tough terms. But hey, I take it. And and after a few months, I actually find a buyer that will pay $1 million, give them $100,000 non-refundable cash, and they're okay with waiting 3 months because they're in Europe on some hiatus anyways. You know, they're wealthy, well-do, so they don't care. They're not going to take possession till way afterwards, so they're okay with all that. So I take the offer to the seller. Say, hey, I got your buyer. Well, want everything you asked for. Seller says to me, oh, you know, Joe, we decided that we're not going to sell after all. I appreciate you finding somebody. I didn't think you ever find somebody with those kind of terms. You know, if I was going to sell, those are the terms I said. I know, but I didn't think you ever find anybody. We don't really want to sell. And I'd be like, oh, okay. You don't want to sell. That's your prerogative. You don't have to sell. You can stay here. When can I pick up my commission check? What do you mean? We didn't sell the property. You're not going to get no commission check. We're not selling. Oh, you don't understand. You signed an exclusive right to sell with me, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, and I brought you a ready, willing, and able buyer willing to purchase that property as specified in this listing. I earned it, and now it's payable according to 7.3. Since you're refusing to accept an offer like that, then where's my commission check? When can I pick it up? That's what 7.3 means. That's what it means when it's earned, when it's payable for exclusive right to sell listing. Okay, make sense? Hopefully it does. All right. Okay, purpose for holdover period, protect agent commission with disclosed buyers after the expiration of listing. You're going to see that in the exam. Paragraph 8, limited third-party compensation. So I'm not gonna. Let's say I'm working with a fix and flipper, and part of my deal of work, I specialize in fix and flippers because I used to be in the contracting business. And here's what I'm going to do for you. I want to help you make investments in real estate. You make the investment, and I'm going to contract everybody to fix it up for you. And then I'm going to have an override when I do that. Okay. In addition to my commission, I'm going to charge an override because I'm contracting all these people. That's what this means. I have to disclose that if that's what I'm doing. If I'm doing that and not disclosing it, that's a no-no. I got to disclose that. That's what I'm doing. Paragraph 9, other brokers. I'm going to engage other brokers. Here comes the co-op. Okay. And I'm going to go to the MLS to engage those brokers. So when I'm dealing with the MLS, here's some choices. You got to let me know it's okay. The property will or not be submitted to the MLS, will not be submitted to other property information exchanges. So are you okay, seller, with me putting into the MLS? Yes, great. And I'm checking the boxes will and will. No, okay. It's a different kind of listing. It's not going into the MLS. So it depends on the seller, how this is filled out. See, certain things are filled out, other things aren't. Okay, they're going to authorize the use of electronic other marketing methods, maybe something they don't like. I don't like Facebook. Oh, that's going to be hard because everything shows up on Facebook. Further authorizes use of MLS property exchanges of any, and the property address will not be displayed. Sometimes people don't want their address. Go ahead, show the house, all that kind of stuff, but you have to put the address on there. I've had people tell me that. Yeah, we don't have to put the address on there. It's okay. So we'll check that box. Okay. The listing itself will not be displayed on the internet. We'll check that box. And then access is 9.2. How are people going to access to get in there? Are the brokers going to access it? First off, how am I going to access it? And other brokers. So I have this electronic lockbox on here. We can put on there, records everybody that comes through. You have to have a special code to get in. Okay, great. We can use that. Or I have this manual lockbox that I'm going to use. Are you okay with that? Maybe it's an investment property, maybe it's a vacant property, who knows? So I'm going to use a manual lockbox. Or maybe something else. Maybe the seller says to me, wait a minute, are you going to be here for every showing? I've had sellers ask me that. What do you mean? You want me here to be at every? Usually I'm not there for every showing. Typically there's going to be, if someone's coming to your house, it's going to be with an agent. So it's going to be their agent coming in showing the property. You know, we have errors and omissions insurance and all that kind of good stuff. So we have insurance. Oh yeah, but I want you here to show the property because you'll know all the ins and outs about the property, and I want you here, Joe. If I'm going to pay you all this money for this commission, I want you here. I've had the sellers tell me that. Oh, okay. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Okay. You know, maybe some of those high-end properties, that's what happens. Or properties that are complex, you know, some ranch properties are complex. So I have to be able to show them the different parts of the barn and this and that and things like that, right? So maybe they want, you know, brokers access. Seller agent must accompany everybody that comes in. Could be that, right? Whatever it is, we define that here. Other than broker, you're going to let other brokers in? Okay, I hope so. Unlicensed brokers assistants. If the other broker can't get there, can their assistant show the property? They'll be unlicensed. If they can, I'll check that box. Appraiser at some point is going to need to get in here. Is it okay if they get in using that box? Okay, we check that box. Inspectors, they're not licensed. Is it okay if an inspector comes in? No, I want you or somebody here when the inspector comes in. Oh, okay, so I don't check that box. So whatever the instructions are for access, this is very important. Okay. Broker marketing 9.3. If I'm doing some specific kind of whiz bang marketing scheme to get this thing sold, I'm going to have a broker event. I'm going to have everything catered. I'm going to have a live band there. I'm going to have, you know, spotlights and people sharing out of airplanes. I'm going to do all these things to sell this property, right? This $1 million property for cash that I was talking about. All right. And if I put all that stuff in here, I got to do that because now it's in writing. Typically, what I do is I'm going to put a sign in the front yard. Okay? Broker sign will be installed in the front yard. Seller authorizes videos and pictures of both interior and exterior of the property, except sometimes seller says, no, I don't want you to be videoing my gun collection. Or I don't want you to be videoing the art over here on the wall. That's expensive art. Or I don't want you to be videoing whatever, you know, all the tools that I have in the garage. Whatever. They could have reasons for it. So you have to honor that and put those exceptions in here. Okay, 9.4, marketing termination. So this was something new that added in 2020. And this has to do with our ability as brokers, because all of our marketing now truly is on the web, on the internet, and you start putting this stuff out there, and it gets syndicated out. Especially if you know, for instance, just saying, like, toot my horn a little bit, Keller Williams, we have an amazing syndication that happens with our listings. All of a sudden, they just showing up everywhere. I mean, seriously, everywhere. And now the listing doesn't sell, or we get the listing terminated, and now the seller says, you got to pull everything out of the internet off that's out there. I want you to take everything down out there. And if you don't, I'm going to sue you. Okay. Something went awry. And guess what? 9.4 is in here saying that we're going to do our best we can to do that, to take it off. But seller understands information submitted to either MLS or information exchanges could be difficult, almost impossible to remove from syndicators on the internet. And you can release me from any liability. So that's what 9.4 does. We get released from liability because we'll do our best to take it off. But you know how it is. Once it's out there, it's out there. Okay, 10, negotiations, communications. Okay, you're negotiating. Once we get into this now, seller, you got to negotiate through me. No longer can you be, you can't just go directly to the other agent or directly to that buyer. I had this occur one time on a property where during the inspection, the seller was there during the inspection. Usually, you know, it's their property. It's up to them if they want to be there or not. But for whatever reason, the seller was there during inspection. And there's my buyer with the inspector. There I am. And wouldn't you know it, these two guys hit it off. They're like, you know, old lost best friends forever that never met. It was like, really, they're off talking and doing things. And I'm really getting nervous. I'm calling the other agent up saying, hey, just want to let you know that your seller was here during the inspection. And I'm sorry he was, because now my buyer is talking to him and they're communicating. I have no idea what they're saying. And sure enough, they started talking about how they're going to be doing different things that needed to go contractually on. They started to negotiate, you know. So we had to tell them, each of us had to tell our parties, hey, stop, please. I know you guys are getting along and everything. And afterwards, once you have a dinner party, right now, till we get this thing closed, you got to go through me. It actually happened to me one time. So that was really interesting. Negotiating and communication. All right, advertising. Seller agrees that any advertising the property got to be first, that the seller does. I have to first approve. We want to make sure we're on the same, communicating the same message, right? Okay, no existing listing agreement. So here, 10.3 is where that whole scenario that we talked about of sign crossing in future listings last session, here is where it shows up contractually. So seller is going to represent either they are or are not from your party to listing agreement. And then further represent, if they are, have they received a submitted list of prospects pursuant to a previous listing agreement? So it could be that they were submitted somebody that in a previous agreement now that specified could be referring to a holdover. So now if a name is given to you and the seller asks you, oh yeah, another broker had this listed and they had somebody really interested and we had actually offers going, but they couldn't make it. So they canceled and the listing canceled. So if they come back, we want to make them excluded from this listing. You can do that. You check the box that they have received a list, and then you can exclude that in additional provisions, exclude John and Mary Smith from this listing. So if John and Mary Smith make an offer, you don't get paid because you've excluded them from a previous listing. That's how that shows up. Okay. All right. Hey, if seller has given me any kind of photographs, let's say it's the middle of the winter, and I ask the seller, sometimes the little trick I'll do is, seller, hey, do you have any pictures of your house like in the summertime or springtime when this beautiful garden is in bloom? You know, yeah, I do. I love it. I got all this stuff here. Great. Can I use those photos? So, they'll stand out when all the other pictures are in snow. Your listing's going to stand out if you do that. But here 10.4 is saying that they're giving me consent, royalty-free consent to use those pictures. 10.5 has to do with the Colorado Foreclosure Protection Act. We covered that last session, what it is. I'm not going to cover that again. You can read it because it states what it is in here. If that does apply, then you need to use the other form. As I showed you at the very beginning, there's other contracts on there. There's a listing contract for the Colorado Foreclosure Protection Act. That's the one you should use. Okay. Paragraph 11. How we doing, folks? Any questions? Everybody's really quiet. They're just like, either I'm putting you to sleep or you're getting it, one of the two. Are there any questions so far? Interrupt you all the way if you're not getting some stuff. Making sense? Come on, Charlene, are you getting all this?
Yes, I am. So I have a
Yeah.
question. I ask too many questions. Um, so say for instance, for us being new real estate agents, if and where our broker come with us the first time, I know you said it before, sometimes not, but just to make sure the transaction, because I remember in the beginning, I don't know if it was you or the other class, that he stated that everyone was going to be there through closing to sign the paperwork. Is that true or not,
So
Vincent?
who's everyone? Who's everyone? Define everyone.
Like the lawyers, the broker, the seller, like.
Okay. So let me give you some clarity around that. So it depends on the area. So on the national part, there's some overlap here that you're bringing up. Okay. So in the national part, different types of things happen in different states as far as what during closing, what is customary. In New York, for instance, a bunch of attorneys are going to show up, and your role as a closing in that closing is very minimal. Here in Colorado, we don't use attorneys. Typically, attorneys are not involved. Here in Colorado, brokers do the closing, and they do that. Brokers would attend the closing, the agent who's representing the side. So both brokers will be present. The closing agent, who is going to be, we're engaging to do the settlement for us, will also be there. A representative of the mortgage company, if a mortgage is being used, will be there. And that's usually it who's there at the closing. Okay. During the time that you're doing the listing, if you're presenting this to the seller, in this case, the broker is not, your employing broker is not required to be there. They just need to be available, or someone they've designated to be your mentor, to be available to answer questions while you're presenting this, should you have any. Your buyer, your seller in this case, asks you something, you're like, that's a really good question. Let me call Joe. And here I get the phone call. Okay. That's legally what is all that needs to happen. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right.
Now I have another question. I told you that.
Okay.
Well, this is for the future. So since the pandemic, you think they're gonna get shut down again since they starting to make us wear masks? Is it harder through the pandemic to sell the houses?
Okay. It's not part of the exam. Don't worry about that. We'll talk about that another time.
Okay.
But
Okay.
the division, the commission gives us rules on what we can do. During the pandemic, guess what, folks? Houses were being sold. Transactions were going on. During the pandemic, the market went crazy. It went up like this, like a rocket. Okay, so don't worry, you're not going to lose business. You just have to do it differently. All right, all right.
Okay.
But Gwen, did you have a question?
Yes, I did. Where do closings have to be complete? Do they have to be at title companies?
Title companies are typically where they do happen. Do they have to happen there? No. There's nothing says, there's no law that says it has to happen there. We as brokers engage the title company to facilitate the closing for us. We're responsible for it. That's why we have to learn how to do the closing, how to do the math of the closing, the settlement. We'll do that in the next session. But they typically happen at a title company, but there's no law that says they have to.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. All right, great. Yeah, guys, don't hold back. I'm just going through here, but don't hold back. If you got a question, raise your hand or something. I'll see it, and we can do it if you got something. Okay. Paragraph 11, price and terms. So this is where we put the price we're going to market the property, the listing price. Terms are, well, they'll accept either cash or a conventional loan, FHA or VA. Those are your, remember, government-sponsored loans, or maybe something else. Maybe they're willing to trade something, other property. That would go in here. If they're willing to pay discount points, that would go in here, what they're willing to do. 11.4 will disclose to them that the FHA and VA buyers there are certain fees those buyers are not allowed to pay. So therefore, you will be absorbing a little bit more in fees if you choose to accept an offer from those buyers. And this is disclosing what those fees would not exceed. So it's kind of giving the range. It's not going to go above this, right? What are those fees? Like, for instance, tax service is one of them. The tax service, what's tax service? Tax service is a service that alerts the mortgage company. This is a typical fee in all closing. You look up your closing, you're going to see a tax service on there. Somebody paid it. Buyer usually pays this fee. What does it do? It alerts the mortgage company if you don't pay your taxes. Because if you don't pay your taxes, they could become delinquent. You could lose your property to a tax lien. And therefore, that would negate the mortgage on it. Mortgage company was pretty keen to that. Therefore, they have a service to alert them. And they make you, the buyer, pay for it. It's called a tax service. All right. Earnest money. So whatever the earnest money is, we put that in here. Earnest money is typically 1 to 2% of the sales price. It's also sometimes defined by the buyer profile, right? So if I've got a property, let's say in Fountain, that's in the median price range, I'm not going to be putting exorbitant earnest money on there, because who's my buyer in Fountain typically? Like first-time buyer houses, probably going to be a soldier. Do they have a whole bunch of money to put down for earnest money? No. So why stress the situation now and make it reasonable that what they can afford? So sometimes it's geared towards that, but typically between 1 to 2% of the sales price. All right, seller proceeds. Seller, how would you like to get, when I successfully sell your property, not if, but when, how would you like to receive the proceeds? You can get a cashier's check. We check that box. It's going to be at your expense. Funds electronically wired. Or a closing company trust account check. So whichever way, usually these days we go with wired, although there's lots of fraud going on in wire right now, folks. Wow. Over the last several years, it's gone up like 400%. Just incredible amount of fraud for wiring. So be very, very careful in this area. May even have something, I don't know if they put that on the exam or not. I'm about ready to take the exam myself, so I'll let you guys know. But what's happening is, right before closing, your buyer's would get an email from, it looks like, the title company stating, here's your new wiring instructions. We just had a change in our wiring instructions. And buyer now wires the money to those instructions. And that was, somebody had hijacked that account. A hacker had hijacked that email account, put those wire instructions, and people have wired tens of thousands of dollars to these hackers. Big, huge fraud right now in wire transfers. Be very careful. The only time you do give instructions is either verbally, or you mail it to them, or you hand it to them. Okay, FIRPTA. Remember FIRPTA, what is it? It's your foreign investment real property tax. So if your seller is a foreign person, you check this box. Now what happens? Let's come down here and I'm going to show you what happens. Here's FIRPTA. Okay. That means that anything for over 300,000, you got to withhold 15% of the purchase price. It's due within 20 days. This is what you got to know. This is going to be on the exam, FIRPTA, right there. Anything over 300,000, 15% of the purchase price is due within 20 days. If your seller is a foreign person. The next paragraph, 11.8, has to do with Colorado state withholding. If your seller is out of state, they're not a resident of Colorado, then they're going to have a 2% state tax withholding. Remember, that's only going to be 2% or less, whatever is left of the proceeds. If there's not enough to cover the full 2%, they'll take what's ever there, and they're not going to pursue for the balance. There's no deficiency for that. But this here, they want, for FIRPTA, 15% is due within 20 days to the IRS. Okay. 12 is deposits. Any deposits that the firm receives for earnest deposits, they're authorized to make sure those are delivered to the closing agent at or before closing of the sale of the property. So if it's going into the broker's trust account, got to make sure it shows up at the closing company at closing. It's our responsibility. That's 12. 13, and what's included or not included in the property. So here's where the whole section on when we cover personal property international. So what's defined as personal property, right? The test for personal property, the test for a fixture, rather. Here's where this kind of stuff goes. What's attached? What's a fixture? So you notice in here, if you read it, there's a lot of stuff that's already in here. Look at what's in here: lighting, heating, plumbing, ventilating, air conditioning units, TV antennas. It's already in there. You don't need to reiterate. It says built-in kitchen appliances. You don't need to say microwave if it's built in above the hood and bolted in, or the dishwasher that's bolted in and it's plumbed in. The microwave has an external vent. I mean, you don't need to say that. It says built-in kitchen appliances. But I see it all the time in offers. So, oh well. Just trying to help for future offer writers out there. You don't need to say it again. Built-in vacuum systems. Look at all the stuff that's already included here now. But remote controls, we want to put a number of remote controls. We don't want to put any. We want to put a number so there's an expectation of what to expect. We only can find one. Okay, then there's what's one. Usually there's two, but maybe there's only one. Whatever, put it in here. Check the box if these apply. Solar panels, water softeners, security systems. Okay. If any of are attached after the sale date, seller listing contract, additional items are also included. Any additional items are attached after. So what's the fixture attached stays with the property. Okay, that's your test for a fixture. All right, 13.1 is the stuff that's included that's not attached. They already have a bunch of stuff in here. They already say window coverings in here and treatments. Okay, so personal property, how is it conveyed? Personal property is always conveyed with a bill of sale. There could be things, though, that are an exception, can't be conveyed because maybe they're on a lease. Like, for instance, security alarm systems that sometimes are leased, right? Water softeners are sometimes leased. So be careful of those items and ask, are those leased items? Well, then I have to put on here, they're not going to be conveyed free and clear because there's a lease that you're going to be either taking that with you, or if it's staying here, then that new buyer is going to have that lease now assigned to them. You see? So some of these can get kind of tricky, but you got to ask these questions. It's part of your job. Be very thorough. So you can mark on here the leased items in 13.15. You mark those things in here and you get the documents to support it. 13.2 are exclusions. Anything that you don't want to go and sell with this property seller, tell me now and I'll put them right here. Well, you're not taking the front load washer and dryer. Okay, putting that in here. You're not taking the artwork that I have in the backyard. The sculpture I have in the backyard. Okay, I'm putting that down. You're not taking the chandelier in the dining room. Okay, I'm putting that down. Whatever it is excluded, that's what goes in here. Okay, there'll be some test questions about exclusions and your understanding of it. Trade fixtures, remember the trade? Go ahead.
So is that include? So say you sell a condo, that HOA fees, that's what you would put in there, correct?
HOA fees?
Yeah.
No, HOA fees is not a lease.
Okay. Well, not a lease, but
no, it's not a lease.
Okay.
There's an area in here that will show where for HOA. It's a whole section here for HOA.
Okay, thank you.
This is not it. An HOA is not a lease. An HOA is a body that's been hired by an association to enforce and regulate the conditions and covenants and restrictions.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Okay, trade fixtures. We all remember what trade fixtures, that pizza oven. Remember me talking about a pizza oven? We talked about trade fixtures in the national section. I guess there's some overlap going on here, but for the benefit of folks that are seeing this for the first time, a trade fixture is something that's an item that is being used for a certain trade. And the example we use is a pizza oven. If I had a pizza shop, the pizza oven that I'm using in a leased space is mine, but I have it affixed so that it looks like it's part of the building now, but it's still mine. When I go and leave and expand my business, I'm taking it with me. That's a trade fixture. So I'd list that here if that was the case. 13.4 is parking and storage facilities. So that is, Charlene, like if you were in a condo or something, this would be certain areas that you have parking spaces for, or storage spaces for, or garages or whatever would be listed here. 13.5 are the water rights. If you recall, remember Colorado adheres to the doctrine of prior appropriation, first come, first serve. So, and those water rights are a separate, are conveyed with its own deed. So if I am conveying some water rights, then I would check this box here, and then I would put the description of that and what type of deed we're going to use at closing to convey that. Any other rights, like for instance, irrigation rights could go in here. If there was a well in the property, I would check this box, and then I would put the well permit. Where do I get the well permit number? Anybody out there can answer that in 10 seconds? 10. Clock's ticking. Doon, 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 doon. Come on, somebody out there. Where do you get the well permit for a well? Please, Charlene, somebody. Anthony.
City Hall?
Oh, state engineers. State engineers. State engineers. That's going to be on the exam. State engineers.
Okay.
You'll see the well permit number, where you can get a map, maybe where it is, how deep it went, what the flow was, all that great information. That's the place where you get the transfer document, is the state engineer's office. But the number goes in here, and then you get that state engineer's office as well. Water certificates would go here. If I was growing crops, and those are Fructus industrialis, that are emblements, which is personal property. So typically something growing out of the ground is part of the real property, except for Fructus industrialis, which are annually cultivated crops. It's that corn, that wheat, that soy, tomatoes, whatever. I can go back and harvest those because that's personal property. So I would list that in here. Those are emblements. Okay, 14 is title, encumbrances. So seller here represents title to the property is solely in the seller's name. Seller warrants they are the true owner of that property. Any seller's got to deliver now true copies of relevant title materials, leases, improvement, location certificates, surveys. All the documents in the property, seller's got to be given to the broker. Liens and all that stuff. 14.3 is how are we going to convey the property? So here's we have a discussion with the seller, the benefits, and you're going to need to understand for the exam, what's a special warranty deed? What's a general warranty deed? What's a bargain and sale deed? What's a quick claim deed? What's a personal representative's deed? This is covered in the national section. So if you're seeing this for the first time, that's okay. Don't stress. We cover this thoroughly in the national section. This is where it shows up in our contract. So however we're going to be using to convey the property, we're checking that box here. Now, 14.4 says the property's got to be free and clear of all taxes, monetary encumbrances. Got to be paid by the seller and released, except as what the buyer and seller agree otherwise. So this could allude to maybe somebody taking over payments. Okay, assuming a loan or something like that, subject to. But seller will be paying off any debt they have on the property from the loan and proceeds they're getting from the buyer's loan. It all happens kind of instantaneously. Okay, if it's existing monetary encumbrances, so this is where you fill out the mortgage company if they have a mortgage on it. Wells Fargo goes in here, whatever. If there's a lease on the property, we list that in here because the property for possession is subject to this lease. In other words, you can't get possession of the property until the lease is fulfilled. Seller also in paragraph 15 now will agree to furnish the buyer at seller's expense owner's title insurance policy equal to the purchase price. A commitment of owner's title policy. Or if they're checking a box, an abstract of title. That's discussed in the national section a little thoroughly than I will here. Association assessments. Here's your HOA showing. So if I'm in an HOA, I put how much is the fee, if there is one. What the frequency is. Could be monthly, could be quarterly, could be annual. And then there's no special assessments or unpaid special assessments against a property, except maybe there's something that has come up. Seller's going to agree here to request promptly the owners association to deliver to the buyer the current statement of assessments against the property, all the documents. 17 is possession. When is that going to occur? So if it's going to be at closing, then we're going to listen here upon closing and transference of the deed. Or I need 3 days to clean everything out. Whatever that looks like goes in here for possession. Okay, we go to explain in here for you the differences of the general, special warranty. We explain these here to you, but they go in further, greater detail than national. So you get a little bit in here, but we'll go in deeper detail in the national, okay? Because you got to be able to explain to the seller the benefits of each one, the pros and cons. Again, you're the attorney going over this contract, right? All right. 18 is material defects, disclosure, inspection. So Colorado law says here, requires a broker to disclose to any prospective buyer all adverse material facts actually known by the broker, including but not limited to adverse material facts pertaining to the title of the property and material defects of the property, any environmental hazards affecting the property, which were required by law to be disclosed. So soil conditions, health zoning, building laws, non-conforming uses, all that stuff that I'm aware of, I need to disclose. Well, I didn't know about that. No one told me about that zoning thing. Well, did you look it up? No. Well, that's your job. You know, big part of your job, folks, is research in this business. Honest to God. Because you got to research all this stuff out. You got to know what the zoning is underneath your property you're going to be selling, or the property that your buyer is going to be buying. It shouldn't be a surprise afterwards for anybody. That's the kind of stuff you're expected to know. And how do you find all that stuff out? Well, the cool thing is once you get licensed and become a member of the Board of Realtors, you get access to something called the multiple listing system. And that has a ton of information for you, a ton of information. Then you'll get access to our realist system that'll be able to get you information regarding the property and what it's zoned, the underlying zoning. And then you'll be able to engage title companies to help you even further if you need to. You got some land out somewhere, I need to know if anybody has the subsurface rights. You can engage a title company to help you with that. So you've got resources, and a big part of your job is doing the research to find out, because you are expected to know. There's no ignorance is going to protect me here. It's not going to work. Once you become licensed, you're a professional. You're a licensed professional. In Conway Bow, not only that, You're an attorney when you're doing a contract. So take it out of heart. You got to know stuff. Okay. There's no ignorance here. All right. So that's my obligations. Seller's obligations. Seller, are you going to provide to me a seller's property disclosure form? So either you're going to agree or not agree. Notice the seller is not required to provide the form. What's the next sentence? Some people miss this one. So I'm going to make sure I bring this up. Here, Colorado law requires the seller to disclose certain facts regardless of whether they're using this form. So if they check the box, they do not agree to provide the form, that doesn't relinquish them from disclosing material facts they know about that property. Okay? Colorado law requires seller to disclose. We make it easy on you, sellers, by providing a form for you to fill out. You don't have to use this form. But if you don't, you're still required to disclose. Okay? She didn't miss that. All right, lead-based paint, 18.2. If your property was permitted prior to January 1st, 1978, you got to fill out a lead-based paint disclosure form. We'll be seeing that this evening. Carbon monoxide alarms. It's now up to us. We're the ones that make sure this is happening. This law is happening. This went into effect several years ago. And the only way they can make sure it happens is because the brokers are responsible to make sure all sellers are putting carbon monoxide alarms in their properties when they're being sold. Okay? It tells them the test question I've heard usually comes over here, right in the contract. Where do they go? Within 15 feet of the entrance of each bedroom, or as required by building code prior to the sale or lease. 15. There's your answer. Where do they go? 18.2.4 condition of property is going to be conveyed in the condition of the property as is. No more wear and tear accepted, unless at seller's sole option they agree to do any kind of repairs. Okay. Otherwise, it's as you see what you get. Wear and tear accepted. Now, 19 is where we can get fired or we can fire our client. Remember, this is an irrevocable contract. So 19 is where we can terminate. Here's how you do it. Fire the party to cancel. So the seller can fire us this way. Number one, abandonment of the seller. It's pretty subjective, I know, but it's in there, abandonment. What does that look like? True abandonment is like, where really, and I've seen this, where the sign goes in the yard and you don't hear from that agent again. Seriously, the seller doesn't hear from that agent again until it's getting ready to renew, and then they'll get a call saying, hey, you want to renew. That's kind of abandonment, right? You just no more communication. So, but it's very subjective. It really is. It's up to what the seller feels what abandonment is. Abandonment of the seller. Typically, you're not responding to the seller. You're not doing some of those uniform duties. Okay. Failure to fulfill all those material obligations of the broker, and 3, failure to fulfill all those uniform duties in paragraph 5. And if I check the box for seller agency, also failure to do those additional duties of agency in paragraph 6. That's where I can get fired. So that's why paragraph 5 and 6 is so very important. And that's where you're going to get some test questions on, because that's what you have to do per the contract, and that's where you can get terminated, because if you don't do these things. Okay? Right, 19.2, right to the broker to cancel. This is how we can fire them. Remember, it's an irrevocable contract. I just can't say, man, this people driving me crazy. I'm firing them. They're driving me crazy. All right. It could be true. They could be driving you crazy, but that's not a reason to terminate. These are the reasons to terminate. What are they? Number 1, we find it's unsatisfactory of the physical condition of the property or its inclusions. So the property is in some kind of physical condition that I can't sell. Any proposed or existing transportation project, road, street, or highway. Ooh, we just got news. I-25 is getting expanded, and it's going right through your backyard. So I don't think I'd be able to sell your property for what we could before. I don't think we sell it all. In fact, I think the state is going to approach you for an eminent domain. Okay, so that could do it. Any other activity, odor, or noise on or off the property and its effect or expected effect of the property or its occupants. So something going on in the neighborhood, maybe. Okay, it doesn't have to be on the property. It says on or off the property, something going on in the neighborhood. Or 4, any facts or suspicions regarding a circumstance that could psychologically impact or stigmatize the property. So here is where, if you feel uncomfortable because someone did die in that property or someone contracted AIDS, you don't want to go ahead and continue this listing, you can terminate right there, paragraph 4. Because I'm uncomfortable with it, and I don't know. I know I'm not allowed to disclose it, but I don't really want to be work doing this. You can do that, terminate right there because of that, paragraph 4. Those are the only areas that you can fire your client. Those are the only areas that they can fire you. Otherwise, it's an irrevocable contract. Okay. Any questions on that? Because I want to make sure you guys are getting that part. Is that making sense? Or anything else I've covered so far? We good? Moving on. Remember, I'm required to disclose material facts that I know, no matter how I find out about it. Make sure you know that. Oh, this lead-based paint thing. If I don't complete this form, and I have a contract, and I don't complete this form, then the contract is void. So you got to make sure you do this lead-based paint form if you have a property that was permitted. Make sure not built, it's permitted before January 1st, 1978. All right, paragraph 20. What happens to that earnest deposit should the buyer default? Now, if the buyer defaults, they're usually held to liquidated damages. And those liquidated damages is that earnest deposit they put up, they lose that. If the buyer defaults in a contract to purchase. If the seller defaults in a contract to purchase, sellers are held to specific performance. They could be sued to sell the property. But number 20 is, what happens to the earnest deposit if the buyer defaults? Do I get it all? The seller asks me. Well, if I check the box 1, 100%, yeah. My brokerage says for me to check box 2. We're going to split it 50-50. If I don't check any box, it's all going to the seller. We typically give that to the seller. I don't know why they put this in here. I don't know anybody that does that. But it's there. Maybe it is part of your policy. Who knows? Maybe your brokerage does some whiz-bang marketing and they want half of that. Who knows? 21, cost of services and reimbursement. So unless otherwise agreed upon in writing, folks, guess what? We bear the cost for all the marketing that we're going to do in this property. Now, if there's something in writing that says, hey, in order to market this property, I'm going to have to take out ads in the New York Times to find a buyer, an international buyer for this. And that's going to cost. So to do that, here's a marketing fee in addition to my listing fee, but you got to pay this marketing fee up front. That could be a provision in here. And sometimes that does happen, especially on specialized properties. It does happen. So it could be, but it has to be in writing. Otherwise, we bear the cost for the marketing. And we're not going to engage anybody that's going to result in a cost to the seller without their approval. So I can't go get the property surveyed and thinking, oh, the seller's just going to pay for it. Well, I better get their approval before I go ahead and order that survey. Okay. I got to disclose the settlement cost to the seller. And they're acknowledging that different costs vary between different service providers. And the seller is responsible for maintaining the property, not me or my firm. 24 is discrimination. This is my fair housing. I can't discriminate against all the protected classes, the federal ones, and also the ones from Colorado. Don't forget, Colorado's added sexual orientation, marital status, age, disability, religion. These are all your protected classes, including Colorado's. All lumped together. 25, recommendation of legal and tax counsel. Where have we seen that before? Very beginning of this contract. Here they're saying it again. Mediation. Okay, this is an important, you're going to get a question on mediation. So if you read this, your head's going to spin. Let me take it down to what it looks like. Here's how the question is going to see it, and then it'd be better for me to explain it this way. So it says, first of all, mediation is not negotiable. Remember paragraph 1? Didn't we say that we're already agreeing to all the provisions in this agreement, right? So mediation is not negotiable. If there's a dispute, and who is that dispute with? Well, who's this agreement with? The agreement is with the brokerage firm and the seller. And then the agent represents the firm. See how the link is there, right? So there's a disagreement to the point where now seller wants to get out of this contract because of something the agent did or said or whatever. It's irrevocable. Brokerage firm says, no, that's not a good reason. Well, now there's a dispute. So we're going to resolve that dispute by going to mediation first before we go get attorneys to try to start suing each other, because we've already agreed to it in this contract. Here's how mediation works in this contract now. So we got to seek resolution for up to 30 days. It's going to take 30 days for us. Now that we discover we have a dispute, we're going to try to resolve it. And we're going to take 30 days to do it, up to. We can do it in 2 days, great, but we're going to take up to 30 days. We're going to select a mediator to help us with this. And we're going to split the cost of that mediator. That mediator is going to help us resolve our dispute. And he may come up, or they may come up with a solution. And if they do, and we like the solution to that dispute, and we agree upon it, then we're held and bound by that solution the mediator came up with. If the mediator comes up with something and somebody doesn't agree with it, one party does, but not the other one, it's not good for everybody. They can't agree upon that resolution. They can't agree. Then they're not bound by whatever the mediator brings up. So understand the difference here. It's not negotiable to mediate, but we're not bound by whatever the mediator comes up with. If he comes up with something that I don't like, I don't have to do it. But if he does come up with something I do like, the other party likes, then we can do it. And now we're bound by that agreement. Okay? Is that making sense? Mediation? Any questions on how that works? Is it making sense? Yeah?
I do have a question. So you guys both have to agree on what the mediator said, right? In order for you guys to be bound to it?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Both got to agree to it. Right?
Okay, thank you.
Right. I should just said that instead of all the other stuff. Right. Right. Okay. All right. That's mediation. Now, here are 27 attorney's fees in the event of any arbitration litigation. The prevailing party is going to pay is going to get their fees paid. So if you take someone after mediation, then you go to court, you sue, and you lose, you're going to pay your attorney and you're going to pay the other party's attorney too. Any additional provisions that could be part of this agreement that you can be writing in here as an agent, you will write in here. But this verbiage has not been approved by the Real Estate Commission because you're putting it in. What are some of the things you could put in there? You could state, for instance, I agree to do an open house every once a month, or I agree to some kind of social media blitz or something, live event at your property first weekend of the listing. You know, that's one of the things we did, Charlie. We did live feeds on our social media platforms when we had a listing, so everybody could come to the listing by tuning into our feed. So that was one of the things we did as during the COVID things. So maybe we put those type of things would go in here, right? Whatever we say, we got to do because it's part of the contract, right? Attachments would come like, remember when I talked about the listing, the legal description? There's a long one. I might be see Exhibit A. and then I would put an attachment, I would list Exhibit A. So now it's part of the agreement, that lengthy legal description. Okay, well, so whatever is attached, I list in here. Lead-based paint disclosure would be another document I would put in here if I'm listing a property that was permitted prior to 78. Okay, I would put that in there. All right. 31 is notice of delivery, choice of law. So any kind of delivery of notices, notice to terminate, notice of this, or whatever notice is got to be in writing. And it also, we're stating here that we could also accept electronic notices, electronic delivery. So through the email, internet, choice of law, any kind of disputes, we're using Colorado law because property is in Colorado. You may reside in a different state, but we're using Colorado law. 32 is modifications. No modifications have been made unless all parties have agreed to it. So that's where we discuss the area where if you could get a test question where if someone makes a change in the contract, is it still valid? Well, all parties must initial that change if it's happening. Okay. Counterparts are if more than one party, I got co-owners spread across different parts of the country, world even, and they're signing it, separate documents of the same thing, but they're copy of it. If I bring them all together, those are counterparts. I bring them all together, that will make one document. So they don't all have to sign the same document. Now that everything is electronically, it happens that way much easier. Before electronic documentation, it was hard to do that. This is the entire agreement. We haven't made any kind of side agreements or anything like that. Any prior agreements are either oral or written. They're all merged now into this. You're going to get a copy of the contract, including all the attachments. And that, my friend, is the exclusive right to sell. Now, we didn't put the areas where you sign the contract just to save space, but that is the exclusive right to sell contract. Does anybody have any questions overall that you wrote down on the exclusive right to sell contract? All right. What's a single party listing? Single party listing is for a specific buyer purchase the property. So they give a good example here of you're working with a buyer and they have a specific need. Maybe they like a particular neighborhood, like a particular model in that neighborhood. We have some great new neighborhoods here that have some great floor plans from builders. So they're pretty popular out there. And sometimes people ask for those floor plans. So you got to kind of get to know your inventory. So if they ask for that floor plan from a particular builder, it could be your job to go find those floor plans built in that for that builder in that neighborhood and start contacting those folks and saying, hey, would you be interested? Would you sell your house for the right price? I have a buyer that would love to buy in here. They would like to buy this floor plan. And are you thinking about selling your house? And if you find somebody, then they may say, yeah, I'd sell it for the right price, but I'm not interested in listing my property to the rest of the world out there. But if you got a buyer that's interested in buying my house for the right price, I'd take a look at it. All right, that's a single party listing. So you do a listing with them just specifically for that buyer. You don't market it to the rest of the world. So those boxes that we just went over to checking for the MLS and stuff, you don't do that. You're it's a single party listing strictly for that buyer. Okay, you would put the buyer's name in the additional provisions, making a single party listing. Okay. There's no holdover period in those. Why? Because you're already stating who the buyer is. So therefore, there's no point in having a holdover period. Okay. Buyer representation agreement. Okay. So I got good news for you out there, folks. We're not going to take as long going over this form. Why? Because it's exactly the same as the one we just did. I'm just going to go over the areas that are different. The biggest difference is this is for when you are being hired as a buyer's agent. So everything on here is for the buyer. How you're going to be representing the buyer. Okay? But everything else in this form is exactly the same. this box. This was first, it was changed again as of January 20. Line 4, 5, all the same. Everything on 6 is the same. Line 7 and 8 is the same. 10 is different because this is a buy contract. Okay, your choice is to be a buyer's agent or transaction broker, just like we covered. The date, same thing. It's the date that you fill it out. Okay, paragraph 1, exactly the same. Paragraph 2, exactly the same. Paragraph 3, exactly the same. All the way through here is the same, nothing's different. Deadlines, relationship, this is all the same now here. You're stating that you'll be the buyer's agent, okay? And you're asking, am I going to be just a buyer's agent? So if I find a for sale by owner that wants to sell their property, they're not using an agent, is it okay for me to change my status and be a transaction broker? That's that scenario now. It's a little bit slanted to the different side, okay? But otherwise, the verbiage in here is exactly the same. The scenario was different. Paragraph 5, brokerage duties, uniform duties, exactly the same. Nothing changed there. Nothing changed. So if you learn one, you learn them both. You learn all of them because all of our contracts have the uniform duties. Okay, paragraph 6, no changes there. 7, now we have a difference. Paragraph 7 is different than paragraph 7 in the other form we just did. Paragraph 7 in the other form we did, it was what we're going to charge the seller. Paragraph 7 in the buyer agreement is what we expect to earn. And they call that a success fee. That's the side of the commission that we're going to earn. Okay, so what is that? We check box 711 that we like to get the success fee. And what do we expect to get? It could be a percentage of the purchase price, or it could be a dollar amount. So people ask, well, what numbers you put in there? Well, you may need to go to your office policy manual to find that out. You could do some research to find out what properties are going for, what they're offering for your buyer, and put that in here. So, or something you agree upon with your buyer. So a lot of resources to go what you put in there. Any adjusted amount, you can see because if there's adjustments to that, you can describe that in the additional provisions. When it's earned. So when it's earned is quite different than when I went through the whole scenario on the seller agreement, that crazy seller thing, right? This is quite different. Let me go over this here. So it's earned upon the property being purchased, and the buyer closing on it. If it fails to close because of the seller's default, you're not owed anything. You don't get anything on this. It's not earned. But if the transaction fails because the buyer's default, the success fee will not be waived. And that's payable upon the buyer's default, not later than the closing of the transaction. Wait a minute, you're telling me, Joe, that the buyer may owe a commission? Could be. Depends on how the next part of paragraph 7 is filled out. Okay, we'll see that coming down here in a minute. Hang tight. Hang tight. Could be. You could also charge an hourly fee and put that in here. You could be charging a retainer fee, put that in here. Any other kind of compensation you would list here in 714. If you're doing a lease, you would fill out 7.2. Let's get down to this here. So however 7.3 is filled out will dictate this payable thing. If the buyer actually will owe a commission, if they default. Depends on how 7.3 is filled out. Look at this 7.3. So number one choice, brokerage firm, listing firm, or seller may pay, buyer is obligated to pay. So it says buyer is obligated to pay any portion of the success fee which is not paid by the listing, brokerage firm, or seller. So whatever I list in my success fee, for the purpose of instruction, not that any fees are set forth because all fees are negotiable. If there was a 3% success fee that you put in there, and you look at the listing, now we're going to find out that what are they offering. When you look at your MLS, when you start getting the business, you're going to get access to the MLS, and you're going to look up your properties that you're going to show for your buyer. And on those printouts that you see about those properties, you'll have all the information about the property, the lot dimensions, what's included, the zoning on it, the legal description, all that's part of the information, the data you will get about that property. In addition to that, you will also get what the co-op, who they're going to be cooperating with, and what amount of the commission they're willing to go ahead and share with you. So that's where you'll see they're offering maybe 3%. Your success fee was 3%. Everything is good. Now you look at the next property you want to show them, and you look at it, you look down, you say, oh, gee, they're only offering 2.5% success fee. Now what? I have an agreement and you sign the agreement. If I check this box, 71731 here, if I check that box, then it means I'm looking for 3%, but they're only offering 2.5. Buyer, you got to make up the difference. You're gonna pay me at closing a 0.5% to get me up to 3% is what I'm looking for. If I check 7.731, that's what that means. They're due whatever commission that I'm not going to get of what I'm looking for in my success fee. Is that making sense out there? Are you getting that? Charlene, does that make sense? Yeah? I lost you. Oh no.
Yes.
Okay. All right, good.
All of that. Mhm.
All right. All right. So now if I do 732, buyer's just going to pay the success fee, period. I'm not going to go to the seller for the success fee. I can't double dip. Why would I ever do that? Why would somebody ever do that? Well, I've done it with an investor. Was trying to acquire a property that was on an auction. It was a government silent auction, government property. So on those, you submit an offer and you have no idea what everybody else is submitting. So you got to try to give them the best net to the seller, the highest amount to the seller. So if the seller doesn't have to pay a commission, they're going to make more on it. So buyer in that instance says, I'll pay your commission. I want to get this property, and they'll get the highest net. So it happens sometimes. If 7.3 is 2, just check, buyers pay the commission. Now 7.33 states that we're going to go to the seller or listing firm to get our commission. But if they don't have it all, we're just going to be okay with what we ever get. You don't have to pay the difference. So if I check 7.33 and I'm in that scenario where I'm expecting 3%, they're only offering 2.5. If I check 7.33 on this agreement, I'm going to be okay with that 2.55. Okay. I'm not going to ask you to make up the difference. I'll be okay with that. So you see, the buyer, if the buyer's in default, the buyer could owe a commission. It just depends on how this is filled out. Does that make sense? All right. Any questions on this part? Because this is a little complicated. No? All right. Devin or Gwen, any questions out there for you guys?
No, I'm okay right now.
All right, terrific. All right, here's your holdover period. Guess what? Just the same thing as your other one we reviewed. So we got to do this again. It's the same thing. Paragraph 8, same. Paragraph 9, this is where you get your future listing at. Same thing. All right, to cancel is a little bit different on the broker side. On the right to buy, the buyer to cancel, it's the same. You violate uniform duties, paragraph 5, and then paragraph 6, they can fire you. But 10 too, the only way I can fire the buyer, is by the buyer fails to reasonably cooperate or buyer defaults under this contract, right? They still got to negotiate through me, things like that they still have to do, right? But other than that, to get out of this contract, for me to fire them, they just got to be, it's something like gee, buyer, I've been showing you some properties now for 2 weekends in a row, and you haven't gone and gotten yourself pre-qualified with a lender yet. So yeah, if you don't do it, I can't take you out and show you more properties. So I don't know if you can qualify to buy a house. Something like that, right? Okay, cost of services from outside sources, that's the same. 12, brokerage services, whatever additional tasks I'm going to be doing, I list in here, whatever that may be. Maybe I put in here, I'm going to show off properties via limousine service. Wow, what are you doing? I'm going showing some really well-to-do, wealthy people some properties, and I want to impress them, making sure they make an offer through me. So maybe that's what I'm doing. Who knows? Okay, showing properties here. This paragraph shows any kind of limitations I may have in this. So maybe, for instance, I'm a member of the Pikes Peak Association of Realtors. So I'm able to see all properties in the area that they cover, which they cover all of El Paso County. They cover some of Pueblo County, some of Arapahoe County, not Arapahoe, some of Teller County rather. And that's about it, really. So anything beyond there, you want to look at something else up in Arapahoe or Denver or something like that. I don't have access to that MLS, so I have a limitation of the data I could find for you. So I got to put that in here, what my limitations are. That's in paragraph 12 too. 13, seller, can I disclose your identity? Or buyer rather, this is the buyer agreement. Can I disclose your identity? And maybe he says, no, I don't want you to disclose my identity. Why would they ever say that? It could be a developer that is well known, doesn't want people to know who they are when they're negotiating prices for land, as an example. Could be someone who was famous, doesn't want everybody to know who they are. We're in Colorado, you know, we got some famous people like to come here because of our mountains. So it could be that. Who knows? But there's a choice. Disclosure of service costs, that's the same. Wire and other frauds. Remember I told you about wire? So you're going to get a question about wire fraud. It is a very bad thing. Like I said, it's gone up about 400% in the last few years. And so there's a paragraph now in here about wire frauds, right? Anytime buyers supplying confidential information, social security number, bank accounts, make sure they're doing it in person or a secure manner. Care for those wire frauds. Marketing material, again, we'll do our best to remove marketing material, but can't guarantee. Discrimination, we can't discriminate. That's your fair housing. 18, recommend attend legal and tax counsel. That's the same. Mediation paragraph is the same here. So you learn that whole thing once, and you learn it. That's it. 20, 21, 22, all this is exactly the same. The only thing different now is paragraph 28 comes down to Megan's Law. This is unique to buyer's agreement. Megan's Law has to do with registered sex offenders. So if that's a concern to the buyer, what your responsibility is to disclose to the buyer that if you are concerned about registered sex offenders in your neighborhood, here is this place where you can go to look them up because they're required to register. And that's usually the sheriff's website. So give them the sheriff's website and your obligation is done. It's not your obligation to go look and seek and find these individuals. It's up to them to decide if they're okay with the neighborhood based upon their research. You're giving the knowledge and the tool. That's it. Okay, that's your buyer agreement. Ta-da, a lot quicker, right? Okay, let's keep on going. How do we terminate? We perform the contract. We mutually consent or it expires. The death of the principals also end the contract. All right, let's get to now the amendment. Let's say I need to extend one of those contracts. I would use this form. It's called a listing contract amendment. Same thing, we got the box up here, make sure it's my current form. We check the box that we're trying to amend or extend. So if I wanted to extend the listing of a property that hasn't sold yet, I would use this form. If I wanted to adjust the price of a property I'm selling, I would use this form. Okay.
Sorry, quick question.
Yep.
When we amend the contract, what happens to the original contract? Just extending it? That's it, right? It's not-
Right. Right, so it stays in full force and effect except for this amendment or extension.
Perfect, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. If you're going to be extending it, you got to make sure you get that extension before the termination date, because when it terminates, there's no going back. There's no backdating of our contracts, folks. That's a big no-no. All right, here's our contract to buy and sell. This is the actual purchase contract. So we're going to go over this one. Parts of this is going to be the same. Okay, parts of it will be. So again, this is the most recent contract. This was last updated January 2019. Same things, but the date the contract was done and everything. This is the agreement. Here's the parties. You put who the buyer. Now here you list all the buyers who's going to be of title, and their legal names or their names, how they want to hold title should go in here. So if you've got somebody that is John Richardson the third, you need to put in there John Richardson the third. You know, with number 3, whatever, the 3 slashes, 3 lines, right? Roman numeral 3. So, or they're junior or senior, you need to put that in, okay? And then you have a choice, line 16. We're going to choose a box, joint tenants, tenants in common, or something else. That something else you might want to write in here in your notes that they could be seen on the test is severalty. Remember, severalty is an ownership of an individual without any co-owners. No co-owners is severalty. Has to do with severance, of severing any other relationships. So we asked them, how would you like to take title to the property as joint tenant, tenants in common, or severalty? And they say to us, geez, I'm not sure. Can you explain what they are? Can we answer that question? You should be nodding your head yes. We're expected to answer that question. So what are the differences? Joint tenants have rights of survivorship. Tenants in common has no right of survivorship. Joint tenants is always equal shares. Could be unequal shares with tenants in common if it's in writing. So there's some of your differences. Okay, great, thanks. Which one do you think is best for me, Joe? Oops, can't answer that question. That's legal advice. That I got to say, no, can't answer that. You got to consult an attorney for that. Okay, the contract is not assignable. 2.3, we put all the sellers' names of record on title here. All owners and co-owners go here. 2.4, we put the description of the property, legal description, and the address in here. 2.5 looks just like our listings agreement for the seller for inclusions. That's because it is the same. So if you've read that, you've also read this. We're just checking what we'd like to have included now on the purchase contract, because we would be like filling this out with the buyer to submit to the seller if we're the buyer's agent. Or we'll be seeing this if we're representing the seller being submitted to us from the buyer's agent as an offer. But this is the same as a list. This area is the same as a listing agreement. All the water rights would be listed in here, just like your listing agreement. Okay, here's something we see on the exam. Major reason for buying, owning a condo rather than a single family is because it tends to be more affordable. Condo ownership of the units we own the unit inside, fee simple, while the outside is all owned through the tenants in common. Okay, Charlene, so I want to make sure you understood this part. I think that had to do with your question a little about HOA, because when you said the HOA was a lease, I wanted to also mention this to you, but I wanted to wait till I got here. So you understand that common areas in an HOA, in a condo or a townhome community, you can own the property. You own the property fee simple. You can own it jointly with somebody or whatever. But the common areas, everybody within that association has ownership of in the form of tenants in common. Okay, and it's an appurtenance, meaning that when I sell, that stays with the property, and the next person that owns it gets that as well, those common areas, and those are tenants in common. Is that making sense?
Yeah, so that's basically like the amenities that come with the property.
The tennis courts, the swimming pool, park,
Absolutely.
whatever.
Okay, it came back to me. Thank you.
All right, cool. Rose bush. Here's a rose bush question. This comes up. It's amazing. There's like, I don't know, thousands of different questions. You could take the exam. We're discussing this today, Vince said. You could take this exam 100 times. You'll probably never see the same form of the exam twice. And you're right. He's right about that. But somehow this question shows up frequently. All right, here's a rose bush question. You're going to get this one right now, guaranteed. See if it comes up, if you see this. So it says, rose bush is real property and stays with the house, despite the fact that it was listed as an exclusion on the listing agreement. So this comes in the form of a scenario question. The scenario looks like this. I can't tell you exactly what it is, but it's kind of like this. Seller tells listing agent to exclude a rose bush on the property. It's a prized rose bush, whatever. And listing agent says, neglects to do that on the listing. When he submits it, he doesn't exclude the rose bush. So even though it was on the form, on the listing agreement to be excluded, he didn't do that in communicating it on the MLS and to the buyer that makes an offer on the property. He didn't communicate that it was excluded. So buyers thinking, hey, anything on the property that's growing on the property is part of the property. So I get all this stuff. So now closing happens. So the question is, who gets the rose bush? Because it was excluded on the exclusive right to sell listing, can seller go dig up the rose bush, put it in the pot, and take it with him? The answer is no. It's real property. It stays with the house, despite the fact it was listed as an exclusion on the listing agreement. Okay? Now you're going to get that question right. Ha ha. Okay. Well rights 273. If the property has a well, this is, remember, the offer, the purchase agreement. Then we check a box that it has a well. Well rights 273. And we put the well permit number right here. And again, where do we get the well permit number, folks? State engineer's office. Yay! Good job. All right. Conveyance. Oh, water certificates, any kind of water certificates or water would be listed here if there was any. And they're going to convey those pursuant to those water rights or certificates by doing the applicable legal document at closing. Paragraph 3. This is your dates and deadlines. This is your what I like to call sometimes the milestones of the transaction, right? You got to along the course of the transaction, there are going to be certain things, events that you're going to need to address and take care of. And that's what they're all listed here in paragraph 3. And the deadlines will be established by whom? By you, the agent, with the buyer. So let me first point out to you in paragraph 3 what you're looking at. You're looking at a box that has 4 columns. Each column has a heading. This first column here where it says item number, list each one of the events by number. So that if you needed to, in an addendum, say that really fast, you got to slow down when you say that. If you needed to refer to an event in an addendum, you can refer to paragraph 3, item number 1, earnest money, alternative earnest money deadline. And that would be a good reference point to you to fill out in another form. The column for reference shows this little reference sign. It's a paragraph sign, actually. And it shows a paragraph number. So the event column shows the event. This event, alternative earnest money deadline, you can look up where it shows up in the contract at paragraph 4.3. So you can just look down at paragraph 4. When we're going to get there, I'm going to show that to you. So all these references are the paragraphs where these events show up in the contract. And then it lists all the events in this column. Then you have your dates and deadlines. This is where you sit down with your buyer as you're filling out as a buyer's agent. You say, okay, what deadline can you do this by? And we establish the deadlines. Now there are some kind of rule of thumb things that you'll learn from your brokerage firm, but essentially you will discuss that with your buyer and fill out these deadlines. Okay, so alternative earnest money deadline. Per Colorado law, we learned that we should be giving the earnest money with this offer, or it should be given to the seller's agent, the seller, within 72 hours. If you're not able to do that, buyer, when can you get their earnest money over? Well, geez, I get paid here next week, so I can get it next Friday. Is that okay? It's okay. Let's put that date on here. So you put that deadline there. You see how we're establishing the deadlines by discussing it with our buyer? Record title deadline. This is something we'd like to get the information from the seller about the title. And the title company is going to be providing some of these documents for us. So we got to be maybe contacting the title company. How quickly can you get, or when can you get these documents to us? And we put these deadlines in here when they can get the documents over to us. Now, what I want to point out to you for title, I want you to show you in record. I want you to point out here, you have a deadline for the thing, like in this case, the title work. You have a deadline for objecting to it. Then you have a deadline of a resolution to resolve it. That happens for title. That happens for, down here, let me go down. I'll go back up, don't worry. That happens for appraisal, deadline, objection, resolution. You see that? Happens for survey, deadline for the survey, objection, resolution. Same thing for the inspection, objection, termination, resolution. Same thing there, right? Objection, resolution. So what does that mean? That means the deadline for that event needs to occur by a certain date, whatever you establish it here. You have an opportunity now to review that with your client. In this case, title work, or the inspection, or the appraisal, whatever area we're doing this in. You review that, and then if you don't like what you see, you can formally object to that in writing, and we'll look at that form. You do that in writing by the deadline, before that deadline, and now that gets thrown back into the seller needs to resolve that objection that you've just made. And if they don't resolve it by the resolution deadline, then the contract will terminate. So here's how objection and resolution deadlines work, folks, in essence. If someone makes an objection, you got to make sure you resolve it by the resolution deadline, or the contract terminates, period, end of story. You draw a new contract up. Does that make sense out there? Any questions on how that functions?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, terrific. All right, so that is for title. Association. Notice there's no opportunity to object or resolve association. I mean, there's only a termination deadline. So you get the documents. If you don't like what you see, you terminate, because you can't change those. Okay, loan. So it's a deadline if you're getting a new loan. And then loan termination deadline is when you have an opportunity to review the loan, and you can cancel if you don't like the terms of the loan. So if you're the buyer's agent and I'm filling this out, I'm going to try to stretch this termination deadline out as close to the closing as possible, like a week or two before closing. Why? Loan terms could change at any time during a transaction. So I want to give my buyer as much chance as possible to get out of this if the loan terms change that are unfavorable to them. So I'm going to try to push that envelope as best I can. If I'm the seller's agent and I'm receiving an offer, one of the areas I look at is right here, loan termination deadline. Because I want to see how far deep do we have to go in this transaction with the buyer, and the seller doesn't really have a commitment because the buyer can get out of it sometimes them offers I've seen where these termination deadlines like the day of closing or day before closing. And I advise my seller, what this means is buyer can terminate up to the closing date and get his earnest money back, and you don't sell your house. And usually sellers, when I tell them that, says, well, what can we do about that? I says, we can make a counter offer, and we can say, we can move that date up some. Okay? So this is part of the discussions you're having, depending upon what side you're on about this contract. All right, the rest of the stuff, buyer's credit information, you would only put something in here if the seller was going to be the bank and do seller financing. Seller would probably want to know what the buyer's credit would be, right? Makes sense. And there's an opportunity for them to approve or disapprove of what he finds out. If they're going to be assuming a loan, we would put deadlines for that in here. So they have opportunity to see the terms of the loan they're going to assume. And if they don't like it, they can terminate. Okay. So here's your appraisal. Again, the deadline for the appraisal's got to come in. We can object if we don't like it, and then we got to resolve it if we do. Same thing with the survey. And here's the inspection. Same type of thing. If the property is conditioned upon me selling another property, so I'm making an offer on a property, but I got to sell mine to buy this one, then I would put a deadline of the date that I have to have mine sold by in order to buy this. That goes in here. The deadline for me to complete that lead-based tape disclosure form goes in here, and that's only if the property was permitted prior to January 1st, 1978. And then I put the closing date that I would like to close on. The possession date is typically the same date, could be after, could be before, sometimes it's before too. So whatever that's agreed upon. And possession time, usually it's delivery of the deed. Or DOD, you'll see that, delivery of deed. Make a note of that. Now this acceptance deadline date and time is when we'd like to get this accepted back or not, or an answer back as I'm making this offer to the seller. So seller, we'd like to get this an answer back by, within 24 hours. So I would put a date and time here, 24 hours of when I'm submitting it. Okay. Note number line 88, if we're using an FHA or VA loan, the appraisal deadlines do not apply. So I don't have to fill in any deadlines in here if I'm working with an FHA or VA buyer, because those appraisers are chosen by the mortgage company. There's no way to get them to do anything quicker. They're on their own schedule, so we can't put a deadline when that's going to happen. (3.2) is applicability of terms. We've seen this before. Paragraph 4 is something we haven't seen. This is the actual purchase price of the property, how we're going to be purchasing it. So this, folks, needs to represent and reflect the type of loan I'm getting. So if you're with me on the national section, we went over a little bit down payments and values and loan to value. So for instance, if I'm doing a VA loan with no down payment, I could put $100,000 here for the purchase price, and the new loan line 3 will be $100,000 because he's not putting anything down. They should match up. In other words, it's got to make sense, folks. This can't be some garbage googly gob numbers in here. This is just basic accounting 101. You put the sales price here, how he's going to achieve that sales price. Part of it's going to be in earnest money. Part of it, he could be getting a new loan. Maybe he's assuming a balance. Maybe the seller is getting going to be doing the financing, or he's getting private financing. Those numbers go in here, and then you subtract all that from the sales price, and that's the cash he's going to need at closing. This is his down payment. This does not include closing costs. This is essentially the down payment that you calculate. Then everything should be total the same. So if it's 100,000 here, there should be 100,000, and this should be all the 100,000 cash at closing. Seller concessions. This is what the seller is going to agree to pay towards the buyer's closing costs. Okay, they'll put a dollar amount here. In today's market, we're not seeing anything put in here. But in markets where it's a buyer's market, right now it's a seller's market. When it turns into a buyer's market, sellers will pay all kinds of costs to get the buyers to buy their home. So that's where that number goes in here. Okay, earnest money, if there's earnest money, what form is it taken? That'll be listed in here, and who's holding it. If it's going into a trust account from the broker, we'll put in either broker's trust account, XYZ broker trust account. If it's being held by a title company, earnest deposits can be held by a third-party trust account like a title company. Then you put the title company's name in here. We got to know where the money's at. Okay. Rest of the stuff you need to kind of read through here because we go over it in that paragraph 3. Remember alternative earnest money deadline? Here's where it's referred to. And how you're getting the money back. You got to get the money back. So 432, return of the earnest money. So in the listing agreement, we put how much is it going back? 100% are we splitting it, right? For liquidated damages? Well, are we going to get that money back? We've got to go do it correctly. And the correct way for the buyer to get the return of their earnest money is they've got to terminate time during the right time periods. So if a deadline passes and they're trying to terminate because of that deadline, there's no longer an opportunity for them to terminate. For instance, if we're terminating because of an inspection item, but the inspection deadline for the objection is passed, I can no longer terminate because of that inspection item. And I can't use another item to terminate to substitute for that inspection item. That would be fraud and dishonest. And you could be held liable for it, and not a good thing. So you must terminate by the deadline for the event that the deadline has been established for, okay? Number one. And if you do that, then buyer, and you terminate correctly, do it in writing, then you will get your earnest money back, okay? You're going to get it within 3 days of the seller receipt of that form. Seller agrees to this already. How this works in 432. She could get a question on that right there. Good funds. What are good funds in Colorado? Good funds are, says right here what they are. Electronic transfer funds, certified check, savings and loan teller check, cashier's check, good funds. Do you see anywhere in here cash? No. Cash is not good funds in Colorado. Okay? Cannot show up at the closing table with a suitcase full of cash. They won't take it.
Is it because it's not traceable, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Where'd that money come from?
Okay,
Nope.
gotcha.
Not going to work. I'm going to tell you, go to a bank, get a cashier's check for that. Run that through the bank. All right, 442, time of payment of payable funds. So when we do that cash to close calculation, paragraph 4, 442, we're going to be disclosing here to buyer, do you have those funds available to you, that down payment? Are they verifiable and readily available? So we check the box. They do or do not. Well, why would somebody how can they buy property if they're not available? Well, what if they're getting a down payment assistance program? They would check the box, they do not have available. Or what if they're getting the funds from the sale of their property they're selling? They would check the box, they're not readily available. I guess sell my property first. So how this is checked doesn't make the buyer good or not good, right? Don't think that, because it could be coming from different areas. But the seller needs to know if they're available or not, and we check the box accordingly. Okay, 4.5, they're getting a new loan. We identify in 4.53 what type of loan they're getting. And that they're getting this loan, and that the loan, either whatever kind of loan they're getting, they're going to get a loan estimate from the mortgage company. And that's got to be given to them within 3 days. Remember, we looked at that form, 3 days, in the national section. If they're assuming a property, then the terms of the assumption is going to go in here. And the seller will or not, this here is important. This has to do with novation or assignment, right? Remember that? Where the seller will be released from liability or not. So we're checking the box what that's going to look like here. Will or will not be released from liability. Something we see on the exam, an adjustable rate mortgage does not include negative amortization. What gives you negative amortization? An arm that has a payment cap. Okay. Benefit for buyers using loans with private mortgage insurance is lower down payment. We discussed that in seller finance in the financing section. Okay, here's seller or private financing. If we're doing private financing, we'd be checking this box in here. And then these kind of the financing terms need to be drawn up by either attorney or a licensed mortgage professional. You, as licensed agents, cannot draw up the terms of the financing. You can do the contract, but your Conway Bow does not allow you to do financing terms. Okay, the buyer may terminate as long as they're doing it by the deadlines and doing it correctly. And they can get their earnest money returned back to them. Paragraph 5 is the financing conditions. So in here, I want to point out to you, if you're getting a new loan, then they got to do it by the new loan application deadline. And then remember that termination deadline I was telling you about? Loan termination deadline. I try to push back as far as possible. Well, because here's where it shows. This condition, that loan termination deadline, here it is. This condition is for the sole benefit of the buyer. Buyer could terminate before the loan termination deadline if it's not satisfactory to the buyer and buyer's sole subjective discretion. They don't have to even give a reason. I don't like the loan anymore. Okay, I can terminate as long as I terminate before loan termination deadline. It's kind of like our get out of the contract free card, right? Credit information, if the buyer or the seller is going to be doing seller financing, then this paragraph would apply. Probably not going to see any questions about that. Or 5.4 existing loan review, but you should read it. So I'm not going to spend too much time on that. Appraisal revisions, here's something. Appraisal revision is an opinion of value. The provisions set forth are for the type of loan or of no financing could apply for a conventional offer. You're getting a conventional loan. If the appraised value is less than the purchase price, the buyer may terminate, may object, and they could resolve. So the appraisal comes in less than the purchase price. That happens sometimes when we get these auction effects and the property is being, bid up. Sometimes the appraisal doesn't come in the purchase price now. So now what do we do? So there's going to be some more negotiating going on at that point. If we're working with an FHA loan, here's how an FHA loan works. The appraised property comes in not less than the number we put in here. And this number usually matches the purchase price number. If it comes in less than that, the FHA, same thing with the VA buyer, have the option to move forward with the transaction, but they have to understand that the lender only is going to loan based on the appraised value, meaning they're going to have to come up with the difference between the appraised value and the actual purchase price should the appraised value come in less than the purchase price. Okay. Lender property requirements, if that appraisal comes back with some requirements, what are some of the requirements could come back on the appraisal? For VA or FHA contracts, if any glass is broken, windows are broken, that'll come back as being a repair item. Any kind of foundation issues that are noticeable will come back as a repair item. Anything having to do with the water or the power or electrical wires being hung out somewhere exposed or wood exposed, not being painted or varnished on the exterior are all repair items. So if those come up on the appraisal, then that's something that's going to be shifted back to the seller to decide if they're going to do that. And in this paragraph here, here's what you got to know. That if that happens, beyond what the seller's already agreed to do repairs for, so it's addition to that, the seller can terminate within 3 days of receiving these requirements from the lender. They can terminate. They can say, enough is enough. I'm not fixing all this other stuff. They can terminate. And they don't have, that's one of the few areas a seller can terminate and not be held to liquidated damages. Okay, here's paragraph 6.3. 6.4 identifies who's paying for the appraisal. Your formal appraisal always required when the lender wants to sell a mortgage secondary market, and got to be used. Appraisals got to be used for properties valued at 250 or more. All FHA loans must have an appraisal. Okay, here's your association paragraph. So I'm not going to go over line by line with this. This is pretty intense. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to explain it to you, and it's your job to read this. Okay, but I'm going to explain it to you right now, the way I would explain it to a client, so you understand. So this says in here that you're going to be purchasing property in a common interest community, meaning an association in a common community. And in that community, there's going to be certain fees or could be fines that you could get by living there. Like if you don't cut your grass, or you don't pull your weeds, right? Or if you don't pay your dues, your monthly dues, you could have a judgment. If you don't pay those fines or fees, a judgment could be created, taking you to court, and they could put that on your property, and they can foreclose on your property if you don't pay those. That's what 7.1 is explaining to the client. Now I want you to read that to make sure you see it, but that's what they're talking about. 7.2 and 7.3 are the association documents. Again, you need to read this because it explains what they are. Okay, what are the association documents? They tell you exactly what they are in here. So make sure you read these here. Okay. All right. All of 7.3, all of 7 has to do with the association, and 7.4 is where it's conditional upon you reviewing those documents, and if you don't like what you see, you can terminate by the deadline. You can't change them, but you can terminate if you don't like what you see. Okay. Paragraph 8 are your title, insurance, record title, off-record title information. So if the seller is going to be paying for the title work, you check the box here, 8.1.1. Then the seller will be paying that expense for that owner's policy. If the buyer selects a title company, then buyer pays for that owner's policy. So be careful how this is checked. And this is the policy that ensures that for the buyer that there's not going to be anybody, third parties, claiming they have a right to that property because the seller wasn't the true owner. Stuff like that's not going to occur because there's a policy of title insurance to cover that. Owner's extended coverage. Read this because it tells you exactly what it is in the contract. Okay, so you just got to check a box whether it will contain owner's extended coverage or not. Like to recover, for instance, unrecorded mechanics liens. We like to always try to get this if we can, if I'm the buyer, because it protects the buyer from unrecorded easements and unrecorded liens. Title documents, it describes what they consist of, and buyers got to receive copies of those. Okay, and just bring up the stuff that make sure you don't miss in here. You need to read this. Make sure you have some coffee when you're reading this, or some kind of stimulant that's legal when you're reading this. Okay, off-record title. So things that are off-record. What are some off-record title things? They got a notice from the HOA stating that fees are going to be going up in the next quarter. They got a notice saying that because of the hailstorm, we have to have a special assessment to cover the cost of replacing all the roofs in the community. Stuff like that. It's not on record, but it's information the seller has. Seller's got to disclose that stuff. Here's your special taxing district. We discussed that special taxing district. It explains it to the seller. Read this. This is when, to pay for different curbs and gutters in the future developments, you're going to have a special tax that could affect your property tax. It's going to be addition to what you're seeing now. So it warns them of that. It discloses that of this too. You have a right to object to the title, and you got to resolve it by the resolution deadline, or it terminates. Okay. Paragraph 8.7 is your oil and gas and mineral disclosure. Now in here, remember, anything big, capitalized, and bold is important. So I'm making sure I'm covering it. So in here, it's letting the buyer know that, buyer, you're buying this property and you have the surface right. Somebody could own the subsurface right, and they don't have to get your permission to mine for that subsurface minerals rights that they have. So it's letting the buyer know they don't got it. The subsurface owner does not have to get their permission to mine for that. Always advising to consult an attorney regarding those matters. Paragraph 9 is your survey paragraph. So if you're getting a new improvement location certificate, this is a document that's you get from the county office, a recorder's office, of the recorded plat map. So it shows the diagram of the footprint of the house on the lot that it's on, where the easements are. There was a fire hydrant on the lot, you know, in the front of it would show that. If there was a street lamp there, it would show that. It shows all the particulars of that lot. So the surveyor would take a copy of that, go to the property, and verify. That's what an ILC is. Who's going to order it and who's paying for it? We describe that in paragraph 9. The buyer can waive the right to it. I always advise my buyers, not only can get an accurate a verification of your lot, but you also, don't forget, folks, this is where you get the most accurate legal description. So if there's any ambiguity about legal descriptions, always order a survey, because that's where you get an most accurate one from. But you have a right to see it, review it, object. If you object, you got to resolve. If you don't resolve, you terminate. Okay, seller's property disclosure, paragraph 10. Seller agrees to deliver, buyer. Most current seller's property disclosure. Disclose all adverse material facts. Present condition, even though they're getting it in an whereas and as is condition with all faults. Buyer, you have a right to do an inspection. Doesn't say how many inspections either, by the way. If you do an inspection, you submit, and you don't like something, you submit it as an objection, and you gotta resolve that. If you don't, then you terminate. If the buyer does not object to an inspection defect until after the inspection objection deadline, it's like making no objections because it's late. Unpaid work on the inspection by the seller can be a mechanics lien on the property. Okay, here's your indemnification again, damage, liens, and indemnification. So if there's any damages because of the inspections that you're doing, buyer, to the property, then you're going to repair those damages, and you're going to indemnify the seller. The seller's not going to be responsible, can't get sued because one of your inspectors got hurt inspecting the property that you hired him to do. That's what indemnification does. Protects the seller. There's property insurable. Buyer has a right to review, make sure it's insurable. Due diligence documents, folks, is anything that the seller may have in their possession that's important to, that may be important to the buyer. They should give those up, okay, in their possession. Okay, you get a chance to review those. If you don't like them, you can object and you can terminate. If you're selling a property conditioned upon your property selling, then 10.7 line 517 will be filled out, 518, with the address of your property you're selling. 10.8 says we got to know where the water's coming from. So either we see that in our seller's property disclosure, or we disclose it here. If we have lead-based paint, that's where this is discussed. Same thing with carbon monoxide, tells you where they go. Here's your meth. So meth is not an environmental thing. It's something people do to the property. So if the seller knows that meth was ever manufactured, processed, cooked, disposed of, or used or stored, they have to disclose. They have to disclose. If it's found that it's been tested, property has ever been used by meth, then the buyer can terminate. Know this, in Colorado, if a property has been properly remediated from being a meth exposure, So they've done the proper things, and they've had EPA go out, state EPA go out and inspect, and they've passed. Then that property, that seller no longer has to disclose that property ever was a meth property. Okay? A properly disclosed, a properly remediated property from meth does not have to be disclosed as ever having meth. Make sure you understand that. But if it hasn't, then you have to disclose that it has meth. Okay? All right. Closing documents, closing information. Sellers going to cooperate with the closing company to close and deliver any documents required. Closing instructions, either will or will not be executed with this contract. We'll look at those here. And then we're transferring title. Here's where we identify how we're transferring title. And we check the box accordingly. Our contracts default, look at here, as delivering a good and sufficient special warranty deed to the buyer. If we want something different than a special warranty deed, then we check these boxes in here. Otherwise, if we don't check a box, a special warranty deed is how the default works in our contracts. This could be a test area. So it goes on to describe what they are. So again, read those. Okay. 14, payment of liens and encumbrances. Any liens got to be paid. Liens by the seller or paid by the proceeds from the seller. The closing costs, closing fees. Here we identify who's paying some of these closing fees. Remember, our title companies wear different hats. They're gonna re-engage them to settle this for us. Okay, if your association has any kind of status letters of the status of the association, they also may have fees to get the documents. We're identifying who, if they do have those, who's paying for those. Certain areas of Colorado have a transfer tax. We're identifying who's paying for that. Certain areas have a water transfer fee. So if that's the case, then we list that here. In some areas in Colorado have a sales tax. If that's the case, we list it here. 15 is your FERPTA. Remember, 15% above 300,000, due within 20 days. Colorado withholding, 2% or less, or whatever's there. UCC bulk sales. Buyer must pay a use fee on any non-real property, that's personal property, used in a business, like a trade fixture. This applies to all properties over $500 in a transaction. And that's transferred using a bill of sale. That's only if it's going with the property. There's your FERPTA rule again. Prorations are going to be as of closing, and we're going to be taxes here are addressed here. Are we using the taxes for the immediate preceding year or the most recent mill levy? We typically check this box, most recent mill levy. That's the last time it's been assessed, is what they're referring to. If the property has any kind of rents or leases, then we're going to be collecting rents. Are they going to rents received versus accrued? Accrued is what's owed. Received is what I have in my hand. Here's your association assessment. If there's any special assessments, who's going to be paying that prior to closing? We identify who's paying it, buyer or seller. Any other prorations we list, like propane tanks, things of that nature, are listed in here. Who's getting possession of the property, or how are we getting possession? And if we don't get it as of the date we listed in paragraph 4, then there could be a penalty to the seller, and we listed it here. We put whatever dollar amount we want, $100 a day, $200 a day, whatever it is. 18, we define again a day. We've seen that before. 19 is your walkthrough. Damages as a cause of a loss or condemnation to the property. What happens if something happens to the property, getting ready to close? I got a contract to buy, something happens to the property. You know, we had that happen here. We had some fires, we had some flooding in our area. Some properties were affected by that. They were under contract. here's what it states. If the property has a loss or damages to the property amount not more than 10%, this is what you got to know, highlight, of the property, and the repair will be paid by the insurance company. Seller, upon the proceeds, got to use reasonable efforts to repair before closing date. If it's in excess of 10%, then it's too damaged. We got to redo this over. Okay. Damages, inclusions, and services. Again, any kind of damages for that might have happened to the property, seller's got to repair prior to closing. If the damages to the inclusions, like if they're put in a stainless steel appliance and that got a damage, they got to put another stainless steel appliance in. Okay, they can't switch it out for a white one, for instance, cheaper one. If the property is condemned, that will terminate everything. Give an opportunity to do a final walkthrough to verify the condition of the property prior to go to closing. In 19.5 represents what the home warranty is. That making sure you have the ability to get a home warranty. It may or may not be included in this contract, but you're aware that you have that available to you. Okay, paragraph 20, recommendation getting legal and tax counsel. 21, time is of the essence. Very important. It means all those deadlines are hard. That deadline has to happen by that deadline, not around there. If buyer is in default, they're held to liquidated damages. If this box is checked, then they would be held to specific performance, meaning buyer could get sued to buy the property. But the box has to be checked for that to happen. Otherwise, they get held to liquidated damages. If the seller's in default, they are held to specific performance, meaning that the seller can be sued to sell the property. Any legal fees or costs and expenses in the event of arbitration got to be awarded to the prevailing party in any kind of dispute. Mediation, same type of thing we went over with mediation paragraph. The same type of thing will apply. It does bring up lis pendens in here. What is that? Remember, lis pendens is a Latin term meaning that court action is pending. So lis pendens on a property, you can't liquidate the property if there's court action pending on the property. So this section doesn't prohibit either party from recording a lis pendens affecting the property. If there's a dispute with earnest money, in this paragraph here, it shows that they're going to wait to a controversy. If there's a controversy, it says here that the earnest money holder, whoever holds that, in its sole discretion, has options. They can wait for a proceeding between buyer and seller. They can interplead. They can assist the parties to resolve it. That's interpleading. They can also provide notice to buyer and seller that unless they receive a copy of a summons or complaint by a court, then within 120 days, they're going to release the money to the buyer. Okay, so the 120 days you should be highlighting in there, and the different they're interpleading. Make sure you understand that. Okay, termination, you get a right to terminate as long as you do so by the deadlines. The effect is you terminate, all earnest money has got to be returned back. This is the entire agreement. Choice of law is Colorado. We go over physical notice delivery. We can use electronic notices. The counterparts, that's the same type thing. Sign separately, bring together. Good faith, 29, something a little different. 29, buyer and seller acknowledge that we're all doing this in good faith. So when you get a buyer that wants you to, geez, Joe, there's so many, not enough properties, everything's multiple offer. Can we put offers on 3 properties and see which one sticks? That's not exercising good faith. That's not ethical, folks. I don't care how much a buyer is going to cajole you to do that. It's not ethical to do. So don't be doing that. One offer with one buyer on one property. When people tell me I want to make a couple offers of different properties, and because one might not work, and whatever one works is good for me. Oh, really? Do you intend on buying all those properties? Well, no, just whatever works, whatever sticks. Well, then which one do you like best? That's what we're going to focus on. Because otherwise you're acting not in good faith. And that's part of paragraph 29 on your contract. Okay? Make sure you're doing that. All right. Any additional provisions were listed in 30. Any other documents you would list in 31. And then buyer signs this and sends over to the seller side. Seller then does only sign if they agree to the offer. If they do not agree to the offer, seller does not sign. They can either turn it down flatly and not even give a counter offer. You just notify the other side verbally. Seller's not going to accept this. They're flat turning it down, not even presenting a counter offer. If they're going to do a counter offer, then they would execute a counter offer, but they still wouldn't sign this. Seller only signs this if they agree to exact terms of that offer. Okay. And then you as a broker, you acknowledge if you have earnest money. And then you also disclose who you are in this offer. You're acting as a buyer's agent, transaction broker. If you're changing a status because you can, because you did that in your listing and you allowed for it in your listing agreement, and now it's happening, you must change status here with this box, and you must also submit a form to your party that you're changing status to that you are changing status. So you're disclosing two ways when you're changing status: on the offer and with a separate form to your principal. You put your firm name, your license number goes in there, your firm's license number goes in there, then you sign. Okay, that's the contract to purchase. So, hey, it's 9:07. Thanks for hanging in with me, folks. We're going to conclude here. I will finish this up in my next session that I do on Saturday, which is the last session. And we're going to do some math on that session too as well. Okay, so don't worry, we'll be able to get through it. This usually happens if we have, we had some good questions along the way. Now, what's the reason for us being here? And I make sure I take my time on these so that I'm also addressing some questions that we have heard from other students, making sure you're getting the benefit of that too as well. Okay, so that's why it took a little bit longer than I anticipated. But we'll get through the material, don't worry. Show up with me again on Saturday, we'll get through all this. Does anybody have any questions of what I've covered today or anything else that I've covered thus far?
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay.
So this is insinuating back to when we a seller agent. Are we able to direct our client, say if they like to the bank, like certain banks, say if they have open line credit, like we find different resources, I don't want to say too much, but because I might confuse somebody. But can we do all of that for them?
Can we give them places where they can go get financing?
Correct.
Yes.
Stuff like that. Okay.
And you know what? Here's how your practice is going to look like in your business. You're going to make relationships. One of the things you need to do when you first get licensed is start to create relationships with title companies and mortgage professionals and handyman and movers and cleaning crews. Make relationships, if you don't already have, with those folks, because those are going to be the people that you're going to reach out to or give. I have a list. I give a list to my buyers. Here are some mortgage professionals you can go apply for your loan. Here's some people that can do the home inspection for you. Here's where we could do some, the seller, I do the title. The buyer doesn't choose title usually. I give that, and then here are some other stuff when you change your mail and moving companies. It's a service you perform.
Correct.
So yeah, you can do that for your clients. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Good question. Anybody else have anything they'd like to ask about? This is the time. Devin, Gwen, we're good. Anthony, we're good.
So Saturday is the last day.
Good job, Joe.
Thank you. Yeah, Saturday will be my last session. Vince will do one on Thursday night. Then I'll do on Saturday. That'll be the last session I'm going to finish up contracts. We're going to do math. Bring your calculator because we're going to do math. All those times I was saying, we're going to catch it in the last session, catch the last session. That's the one. Bring your thinking cap and bring your math. And that definitely is a participation class. I'm going to really get you to participate in that one. Okay.
Okay, when do they give out the certification, like the certificate?
Okay, here's how this works. To get to your certificate that you completed, you got to take and pass the final exams. You got to get an 85% on the final exams. There's a national final and a state final exam online. So you go to the school website, you take those, you get 85% of those. And then you also need to submit your log of the hours that you spent studying. The time you spend with us in class counts towards that. Your study log, you submit that for your 168 hours. And then that's when you get your certificate. Your Rec
Okay,
33.
thank you.
Right, and that's pretty much the whole syllabus. There's a writable version of the syllabus that you can find in the online course. So if you have that all filled out, you submit that, your demographic information sheet, and as Joe said, your study log summary. We'll get that all reviewed the same day that you send it in, and if everything looks good, you'll receive an email to download your certificate of completion and instructions for how to schedule your PSI real estate exams.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, great. Well, thanks for being here, folks. Appreciate it. Hope you got something out of this important class. And we will see you all on Saturday, those who want to come back. Otherwise, thanks for being here. Have a good evening.